Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, January 26, 2023, and we're here for a work session. As always, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Bob, if you could please take the lead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bob. We have no announcements today, except just to let everybody know the supervisor can't be with us today, so she's joining us over the telephone via speakerphone. So she'll be participating in the discussion as needed and going forward today. So we have kind of a long agenda, so we're going to get right to it. We're going to invite our head building and planning administrator, Jefferson Murphy, to come forward so he can introduce our first discussion item, which is a good one and an exciting one today. We're here for a kickoff meeting with the comp plan folks from BFJ. Welcome, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. We have representatives from BFJ with us today. I know two of them very well, know them for over 20 years. Frank Fish, who's behind me, and Noah Levine. They are the principals and the project manager for the comprehensive plan update. We jumped right into the processing of the plan, and they are here today to give you an update. I'm going to have Frank just introduce the other two members of their firm.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You want me to use the...
Oh, you can
introduce
right
me?
here.
This is fine.
Nope, you're right. You're good right there.
So
So,
we're just going to want to bring the mic up to you, okay, when you get ready.
Yeah, right to your mouth. There you go. Okay.
so you know that Tina Lund is president of Urbanomics. They're an affiliate firm of ours, share office space, and they're economists. And,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
So Bill, you need to come closer to the mic. when
That's
you
the
talk.
microphone, that little
That's
object in
your
the
mic
table.
right there.
Can you hear me a little better
Yeah.
now?
Excellent.
Okay.
Larry, can you turn this up so they're more audible? Thank you.
Tina is heading up our market effort here in terms of market overview for part of this study, and Emily is project planner and will be on the sort of all of our meetings, major meetings. We have one person who has had a stomach virus, Taylor Young, and we said to Taylor, you should stay home today. So, and as you know, Noah is the principal in charge for this work. So,
Okay.
Frank, you didn't say what Taylor does.
oh, sorry.
Excuse me, if I could just interrupt. I just got a message that there's no audio on channel 22. Larry?
He's working on it.
Oh, he's aware of it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just quickly, Bob Taylor Young is acting as our project coordinator for the project, which is why we wanted him here. But with the stomach virus, we said, you know, we thought you'd all understand.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll continue. So again, thank you for inviting us to speak with you. We're very much looking forward to kind of continuing the comprehensive plan efforts and really landing the plane, as it were. We've thought long and hard about how that could be done. We presented a lot of those ideas to you in our interviews. We have gotten a very good start in the last month since our contract began, and so I'm here to give you an overview of where we are, where we're going, to kind of hopefully provide for an orderly process. So I'll provide a little bit more, if you can go to the next slide. Just a little bit more of an introduction and an overview of our team. We'll go through our timeline. We'll talk about some of the community engagement things we'll be doing. And then Frank will lead a short discussion on priority land use and zoning issues, but that conversation really will be kind of ongoing. It's not like we need to kind of settle all of those issues today, but you know, just some things to kind of talk about so we know which priority areas we need to dive into first. And then, of course, next steps. So the next slide just breaks apart our project team. We have a very diverse team of professionals involved in this project. The people you see here will be at most meetings. That's something that we pride ourselves in is principal involvement. I'm the principal in charge. Frank will be heavily involved in land use and zoning issues, which we know there are many to deal with. Taylor Young is our project manager. He will also be coordinating kind of the coordination between the comprehensive plan and the seeker. A lot of work will be, there'll be parallel efforts, so he'll kind of make sure that we're on track with both efforts. Emily Juncker will be doing a lot of the day-to-day kind of writing and analysis, so we'll be working with her closely. Tina, as you know, will be doing the economic analysis. We also have Sarah Yekel. She's our resource principal for Seeker. Also retained on this project is LKMA. They were previously involved with the prior planning effort. They'll be doing transportation and infrastructure-related tasks. We also have a number of other principals that will be called on as needed, and those are listed on the right side of your page. We do have a fairly diverse team at BFJ, so if other resources are needed, as the plan evolves, we can certainly bring in other technical expertise. So we will be working closely with you as well as the Comprehensive Plan Committee. We know that committee is in the process of being refined. Once that committee is established, we hope to meet with them as soon as possible. We understand that takes, might take a couple of weeks to schedule, but hopefully mid-February, late February, we'll make our schedules available. The role of the committee will really be to guide the comprehensive plan process and help to monitor our timelines. They'll also help to plan for public outreach activities, so the committee will be kind of, they'll help to spread the word in effect. There's formal networks and then informal networks. They'll provide issues and opportunities, which we will kind of present to them when we meet with them regularly. And then they'll help to ensure that the plan is representative of the wider community, and they will also help to review draft deliverables. And we also hope to work with a steering committee and other specialists in the town, such as department heads, to make sure that the content that we produce is accurate before it is released to the public and of course finalized. The next page provides a timeline. I understand that there's a lot on this page. It might be somewhat difficult to read, but it really does provide for kind of an orderly process over a 14-month period. You'll see that the 14-month period, that a lot of the last stage is really the environmental work, but the draft plan will be done. The draft comprehensive plan will be done in basically a year. So hopefully at the end of the year, we plan at the end of the year to have a draft plan, and then we'll finish the environmental. We'll basically, in the first couple of months, we'll be synthesizing all of the work that had been done previously, as well as meeting with stakeholders. We have two important deliverables. One will be presenting to the committee and to you a summary report of the prior work, and that will really kind of hopefully boil everything down into understandable terms. And then a report on the vision, planning, goals, and opportunities as heard previously. That will be refined throughout the process, we imagine, as we hear more from stakeholders, but those two reports will help us really get a firm standing on where we are and where we need to go. In the ensuing months, we will be delivering draft chapters to the committee. Those chapters won't be final. We anticipate they'll be kind of working drafts because if we submit a draft in month 5 and we hear something in month 8 that might pertain to month 5, we want to be able to kind of go back and revise it, but we just want to make sure that we kind of stay on timeline. So those are important for us to meet and also to get comments back. So this essentially provides an outline. We also know that the town will be kind of reviewing our work closely and making sure that we stay on task, and so we are aware of that. The next slide just talks about just kind of the next 4 months, what to expect. In February, we will be launching our website, or we could even be launching it as basically as soon as possible. We have a draft for you to review. We hope to hold our first committee meeting. We'll deliver our summary of prior work, and then we will begin stakeholder meetings. And we are working with Jeff to develop that list of important people to meet with individually or as a group. In March, we will have an introductory workshop with the public. We talked about holding it here potentially. The idea is to introduce ourselves, introduce the process, and so people can kind of familiarize themselves. We did, one of the tenets when we gave our proposal was to really focus on a lot of the outreach that had been done previously. So we will be continuing on that effort, but we will kind of certainly add to it as we can. In April, we'll be kind of continuing to develop our report, meeting with the committee, and then in May, we will have our first chapter to deliver, and then we're kind of off and running. As I mentioned before, we have a draft comprehensive plan website. This is the homepage. It just explains the process. A lot of the materials, or I should say all of the materials that were produced by AKRF are available, so that's not lost. They're resources, but they are, in our minds, a little bit easier to find, and we hope the site is easy to navigate. We also provided a logo for this effort. We thought that it couldn't hurt to just kind of rebrand the effort just for all of our efforts. I think we create logos for our plans in general, but this one in particular, it would just be helpful for people to kind of understand what the process is and the current effort, and just to distinguish it perhaps from what had been done in between 2020 and 2022. So we encourage the town board to review the website. It's been reviewed by Jeff and some others, and so we are ready to go live when the town is. As I mentioned before, we are going to supplement the public outreach that we've done previously, but we'll really lean on that. We will have meetings with the committee, work sessions with the town board, of course, Hamlet-focused public meetings, topic-oriented public meetings, so those might be with department heads and also various experts in certain areas, and then other particular stakeholders like Conic Bay Medical, just people that we know that we need to meet to understand issues. We will also, on the website, you can find the public survey comments that was done before. You can find the online interactive map that was done before, as well as summaries of other interviews that had been done previously. Again, we will be developing the list of stakeholders to meet with, which will be an important task for us in February and March. We also plan to send the various committees and commissions a questionnaire that asks them what their priorities are for the comprehensive plan, in essence. And the purpose of that is really to get something formal from them. Hopefully they can put some thought into what they see as the most important issues are. And we will meet with them as needed to kind of check in after that. But as far as getting their heads thinking about the comprehensive plan process, it's a good first step. And then I'm going to pass it to Frank now, just to kind of introduce some of the, I shouldn't say introduce, but just to kind of briefly talk about some of the issues that we know about, and then perhaps talk about some other issues.
I'm just going to talk briefly about the...
Frank, you just want to bring the mic down a little bit.
down a little.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Better?
Yes, it's for the public. I can hear you.
Okay, yeah.
Just want to make sure
Good,
everybody can.
Good, all right. Noah, if you remember, Noah went over the timeline, and Chapter 3 gets into land use and zoning, so it comes fairly early, and we like to do that chapter so that we can highlight some of the zoning issues, so that early on we want to get at least a discussion or a highlight of those issues, and then as the whole plan progresses over the summer and into the fall, those issues get, modified over time. So, but what I wanted to highlight here is just that you've told us actually that the industrial zones are something that you want us to look at. We're going to look at those in terms of the extent of those zones. So that's partly a mapping exercise, and what are the permitted uses in the zones. But also we'll look at the sort of the extent of area and bulk uses. What do I mean by that? I mean height, questions of height, questions of setbacks, questions of coverage. in those zones. And of course, we'll try to achieve a balance in those zones between environmental protection, but also tax base and jobs. So we'll look at those. We'll try to identify those as issues in Chapter 3, and then later in the timeline, after we've gone through workshops, we'll be able to get refinements to those. We've listed here some of the different uses, the high cube warehouse versus traditional warehousing. There's differences in the different, even in industrial, sometimes people look at an industrial zone and think, well, everything in here has got to be controlled the same way. Not necessarily. There's some of these uses which we've highlighted here are slightly different. Solar farms, as you know, another issue that's slightly different than the normal industrial use. And then you've asked us a little bit to look at TDR. We're, as you know, a little bit familiar with TDR. We did a handbook on it for the state. We'll look at battery storage, solar and agrivoltaics. And then downtown we're a little bit familiar with because one of the firms we're affiliated with, we share office space with, is Didier Downtown DRI. So we'll be able to go through downtown issues in terms of zoning downtown also. And then finally, commercial corridors in zoning, Route 58 being one of those major commercial corridors. So that's sort of a zoning overview. I don't have, obviously, at this first meeting, any recommendations, but as we get into it, we've seen what AKRF has done. We've seen the issues that we've heard from you. So we'll try to get into those issues and try our best to get a balance on these zoning issues and land use issues, and go through that over time with you, the board, and with the public. And with that, the last slide here is next steps. And Noah, I think I'll turn this.
Oh, you can.
I'll just, yeah, next steps. Noah's actually covered these a little bit. We're going to meet with the Comprehensive Plan Committee as soon as possible. And then we'll have a series of meetings all through this with the Comprehensive Plan Committee. By the way, Emily, one of her charges, Emily's at the far end here, on your left, on the board's left and my right, is been leading up for us a synthesis of the AKR materials, existing conditions analysis. We'll get into, as Noah mentioned, this meeting with key stakeholders, we call them, but also key department heads, obviously. And then the introductory public meeting we'd like to have in March. So that's our immediate next steps. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jeff. Sorry,
Just a couple of things before we turn over to the board for questions. As you know, the board created or recreated the TDR Advisory Committee, Rob Carpenter.
Larry, can you just adjust that feedback a little bit?
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, let's see if that's
Rob
better.
Carpenter is now the chairman. Bob and I had a phone conversation with Rob Carpenter earlier this week, and they're planning on having their first meeting next week. Frank, I don't know if that's been finalized, firmed or not. That was the goal, though. Without the consultant, because
With that said, you brought up, if anybody cannot make the meeting, it's going to be difficult sometimes to coordinate. Let's say hypothetically there's 10 people involved. Have the meeting and record it on Zoom. So, so that we don't lose time.
So next week's meeting would, at Rob's request, would just be internal, not with the
Right.
consultants. And then the second week in February, Frank and Noah would be attending that meeting. And so we just need to confirm those dates, which ties into the next thing I'd like to point out is during the last round of the comprehensive plan update, the consultant had not met with any of the advisory committees. They were planning on doing that late in the process. Frank and Noah believe that should be done very first thing. So we're going to start scheduling those dates immediately with all the different towns' advisory committees. In terms of the community outreach, we have the master list of everybody who signed into the meetings, who signed into the website, all the different involved and interested agencies. We're updating that list now. So if you signed in before under the prior effort, your name will be continued to be on our master list. I mean, we'll be notified of all future meetings and events. Website, you saw a very brief update on the new website, so we'd like to have you take a look at that and confirm that if you're happy with it, or if you'd like any changes made to it, please let us know immediately. We would like to go live with it sooner than later. As Frank and Noah pointed out, we're hitting the ground running on some obviously very pertinent issues that have been raised over the last few months or and longer. We've heard from the community. Those issues have been fleshed out and summarized on page 10 of the PowerPoint. Downtown, they're going to be doing a walking tour with Dawn later today. They're going to be driving around looking at the Calverton area in terms of the industrial areas. They're going to be driving along Route 58, take a look at those issues, and along Sound Avenue as well. So that's just kind of a brief summary of where we are today. So with that, turn over to you.
Okay, Supervisor, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, did you want to chime in here before the rest of the board?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
So if I may, with the advisory, some of the advisory committees anyway, would it be helpful for you guys if they were recorded on Zoom so that you had, there was a library of them and that you could review?
So are you saying if we saw all of their prior meetings, or just?
No.
Going forward, with
Moving
the Zoom
forward.
version.
Yeah.
If there's a topic, I'll give you an example. The Business Advisory Committee just went over their suggestions for planning and the workflow, blah, blah, blah. So to me, that's something that would be significant. I'm not talking about, every single committee, but if that would be useful to you guys, we record that for you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's either Zoom is great, or transcript, either one. Yeah,
Okay.
That's great.
All
Yeah,
right.
no, Zoom, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else, guys?
Jason, go ahead.
No,
No?
just anxious to get it started and get the ball rolling here.
As are we.
Yeah, I like the timeline. I think that, we have to have a checklist of things to accomplish and move it along very quickly, or, do our due diligence, but make sure that we're adhering to those constraints.
Just when you guys presented to the town board, when you were one of, when during the RFP process, you had said you were going to start the GEIS
Really?
right away. And what I see on your timeline, it's at the end. So I'm a little bit confused.
I can speak to
Yeah.
seeker maybe.
Yeah.
The G, let me just look at timeline here. We do want to start, we've got, sorry, Bob, I got to put my glasses on for this
Hey,
one.
that's okay. You can borrow mine, it's
The,
okay.
but as you can see, part one of the EAF, that's month, 5. We're going to start in month 5. So we're starting early. We're not waiting to get into this too much. We want to have the part 1 done and then present it to you, so that we're hoping in the first, that red dot there, I don't know if you see it at the
I do.
bottom.
I see it.
Yeah, that's presenting to you so that you can declare yourself lead agency for purposes of this, so that, as the committee moves on with this, the committee will have its own hearing. You'll be lead agency well ahead of that. And as we're presenting chapters, as you see those chapters, after your lead agency designation, we're going to have scoping, and we hope to do a 30-day, give everybody 30 days to comment, on the scope. And that'll all be done as people are able to see these first chapters, chapter 1, 2, 3, including land use and zoning chapter. And then after that, we'll start into the DEIS process. Our goal is to have that DEIS ready for you at your public hearing on the plan, so that they're synchronized together. What we find is that the public, and I understand this. If I were a public member too, they're going to come to the public hearing. They're going to speak to the issues, but some of those issues have environmental consequences. So we'll pick them up at the same time, and we'll also have a 30-day comment period on that DEIS, so the public can address comments specifically to that if they want. So that when we get into the final plan, we're doing the FEIS when you do the revisions. You'll, after the public hearing, we see it as very important for the board to make the final revisions you want. We pick those up in the final environmental impact statement. And so that at the end of that, you make seeker findings and you're ready, you now have a revised document you're ready to adopt. So that the DEIS, the EIS process does not follow the plan. We wanted to synchronize with each of the steps of the plan. I believe that that's how seeker was meant to be.
And just one clarifying thing, you can see, I think one of the lines shows it's kind of ongoing. We'll be starting our work on the environmental work much earlier than that EAF. Because there's a lot of research analysis that will be kind of happening simultaneously with the development of the chapters. A lot of the review of the material is the same. It's just, there might be more detail in the EIS, but we want to make sure that it's captured. We don't have to do it twice. So we'll be starting that much earlier than what you might see in the approval process.
And I think that begins with identification of these priority issues that we talked about.
One more quick question. As we know, technology is moving quick in all fields, right? Do you guys have access or on your team, people who are familiar with what's up and coming, new technologies, et cetera, et cetera?
I guess maybe, can you be more specific?
Well, like battery storage is new to a lot of things are not new to the country, but new to Riverhead. So someone that can, I'm just using that as one example. Okay.
Yeah, I think, and where we have additional access is, for instance, we've got a couple of affiliate firms that we share space with. One's architectural, one's economic, that Tina's here. She's going to be filling in terms of informing us of new trends, market overview. So we'll have that. Where we do need, if we need something, I think we'll tell you, and we'll be able to get it. For instance, one of our, just to mention this, we're working with different engineering firms who have specialties. So we can, where necessary, talk to them because they work with us.
Great, thank you.
Just a quick question, guys. You guys, obviously, you're the experts at this, and in your experience, is there a particular part on this timeline that maybe historically is more challenging than the others, or is a particular bottleneck or choke point? And I ask that just because if so, maybe there's things that we can be doing on this end to try to get ahead of any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I
Just
think,
keep the process moving.
I think that the timeline assumes the review happens in a kind of an efficient manner. There are things that are in our control. I think we've accounted for, obviously, a reasonable amount of time to review materials. But if things, take longer than that, that can kind of push us back a little bit. What we propose is, you see the chapters are done. Those chapters are going to be, working drafts in Word document. They're not going to be finalized. We really, we want to make sure that we give you something early to react to, so that we can get something back and kind of make edits. If we wait until the end to give you something that's finalized, it just, if there are changes, it just kind of sets us in stone. So I think the review of materials, we want to make sure that that's coordinated and done in an efficient manner that will help us to stay on task. That's my big thing. I don't know, Frank.
No, I think what Noah said is very, we realize, town board, suddenly you get a chapter, Well, if you took 2 months to review that chapter, then that kind of reverberates through the process. But if you took 2 weeks, that would be great. Just to be very, upfront about it. So you're going to control the process in a way, and that would be very helpful for us as you get material. Now, obviously, it's going to go first to the committee. So the committee setup itself, as soon as you finalize that committee, we'll be meeting with them. But after it goes to the committee, they would send things to, it'll go to you. Hopefully, at least 2 of you will be on the committee. We're believers, as you know, that the trustees be represented on the committee. Although you can't have all of you because it'll be then a trustee meeting. But that's the key to us, that we get, you'll control the process, and that we get feedback from the committee and then from you right away. I would say the only other thing I would add is at the end of the process, and it's hard to prepare for this, but at the end of the process, we want to think of things that, for instance, the draft document, make sure it's reviewed by legal counsel, that we're okay on that. Your committee heads, particularly Jeff, so that we go to the public hearing, we're prepared, and you're prepared. You've got all your people on board. That's where things can, that's where it'll be very intensive for you. After the public hearing, you'll need to decide the revisions you want. Based on them, we'll do the final environmental impact statement. So there's a little time period there at the end where it's kind of intense meetings with the town board.
Great.
All right.
Under your discussion of priority land use and zoning issues, you list several things, high-cube warehousing versus traditional solar farms. I just want to make sure anaerobic digesters are included in that?
Yes.
I just asked, I'm gathering that you're going to be using a lot of outside consultants outside of your office itself to obtain knowledge. I would just ask throughout this report that there's a footnote, throughout whenever you're using an outside consultant for that knowledge, outside of, your immediate crew who's sitting at the table. When you're going to outside consultants, I would just like a separate listing of who they are.
Oh, if
What
we
their
do
degrees
that.
are and licensing and so forth, so that
Yeah.
it just validates the work. So if you're picking up the phone or you're sitting talking to somebody else that's giving you knowledge, I just want to know who that is and I want to know their degree.
No problem, no problem.
It's an interesting question, I think, in this project particularly, because we will be really building upon, standing on the shoulders of the prior work that has been done by AKRF, and so we were hoping to
That makes
use-
me nervous.
Well, we will vet it, but at least, there's a lot of analysis, or at least
They
data.
use the facts.
The facts, the data, that's in there.
The quantitative as opposed to the qualitative.
Right.
And expand on it where there are holes.
Lacking.
Yes,
Yeah.
where something is lacking, yeah.
Tina,
like-
for instance, Tina's reviewed the market study.
I
of
started going
AKRF.
at the market study, and I mean, it is incredibly comprehensive in looking at internal data points, but something that seems to be missing is the external pressures.
But like what Councilman Hubbard said, specifically asking about anaerobic digesters.
Yes.
If somebody not specifically sitting at the table in your office is an expert on it, and you're going someplace else, I just want that to be a footnote in your reporting of where you got that
Absolutely.
information from and what their degree of licensing
And
is.
if you'd like to have them come present, we'll make them available, absolutely.
I just don't want, I'm just trying to avoid our consultant said this, our consultant said that. I want to know where you're getting it.
Where you're getting it. Well, for instance, some things we'll just footnote, or we can let you know. For instance, as Jeff knows, our national conference is coming up, actually like April 1 in Philadelphia, and I noticed right away, there's a whole session on just solar voltaic.
You don't have time to go to Philadelphia. You have a comprehensive plan to work.
I know.
It's over the
but
weekend, so
it's over the weekend. We're working, it caught my eye, that solar voltaic, so I signed up for it because, there's experts there. There's always people that know more about it than we do. So we'll pick up something like that.
Bob, what was the,
Agrivoltaics.
what was the other one where you're burning the lumber to
Oh,
create
that's
fuel?
pyrolyzers.
Pyrolyzers.
So that's something that would be new to Riverhead. It's something that I've been meeting with Cornell and a scientist up in Syracuse. Long story short, what it does is it takes wood waste and it burns it, takes that smoke from the burn, changes the molecular structure of it, and converts it into diesel fuel. Don't go crazy on it. We're at the beginning of this, but it's used in other places in the world and in the country.
Yeah, to be
Right.
forward-thinking, I know that food waste is a huge amount of what goes into our landfills, and digesters are an attempt to address that issue. Also, a very large issue that goes into, or waste that goes into our landfill is our construction waste.
That's why we're
And
looking
wood
at
is a
it.
huge part of that. If we could separate that wood out, that might be a good source for the pyrolyzer.
That's why we're talking to them,
Yeah,
yes.
we need to find an alternative other than just dumping it somewhere.
So with that, I understand you're looking at solar voltaics, right? But are you looking at I would put on your
Agro-
radar,
agrivoltaics.
because
Yeah.
I got one call on it, and I know there's gonna be more, and you're probably aware of Massachusetts, Colorado, other states doing it, so that you get dual use of the property.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
One of the things we hear, 20 years ago, solar wasn't an option, Nobody even thought about, anaerobic digest, things like that. So how do you stay in the forefront to validate this plan that it's going to be worthy in 10, 15 years of the expectations? So how do you guys study what's in the future, to what things that we're not talking about here today, but what's on the horizon on a national level and international level of these are projects that's going to come forth that it's not here, it's not now, but what do you foresee in 5 years, 10 years, things that the town should be addressing in advance? We're not going to do a comprehensive plan every 5 years, so how do we validate this to get a longer lifespan out of it?
Let me defer to Noah on that.
Well, I mean, I think we think of usually comprehensive plans being, having a kind of 10-year timeframe, and your current plan is 20 years old. So it's not a coincidence that you're feeling like it's outdated and hasn't addressed some of the things you might want to see. If we do it now, we're hoping to capture the things that we see in the horizon. There are things that we can't see. We don't have a crystal ball that might happen 20 years out. I think that, certain things like fulfillment centers probably, could have been foreseen to some degree. I think that's something that is an issue that we need to address that really could have, big land, you have implications, far-reaching land use implications. There are things having to do with the way people get around that we, it's hard to know, like, self-driving cars and other technologies, having to deal with parking. That it's really hard to know where we'll be in 20 years or 30 years. EV, I think, is electric vehicles is something that it's very difficult to see, but we can kind of see the start of that. You'll want to redo your master plan probably in 10 years as things start to emerge. It's a living document, so I wouldn't see it necessarily set in stone. We'll try to deal with all the issues that we see that are on the forefront, and just anticipate, having to kind of rethink things as needed in another 10 years. I don't know.
No, if I
Yeah,
could.
yeah, please.
Can add into that. Pretty much everybody at the table, all of the senior staff anyway, we're all AICP, and so we're certified planners. And part of that is maintaining our education. So the conference that Frank went to, most of us will attend, and a lot of that is getting what's new and up to date.
Great.
A couple of years ago, I worked with the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council,
Otherwise known as NIMTIC.
NIMTIC, on their 2050 SED forecasts. And as part of that process, we actually did a white paper on upcoming trends and developments that didn't necessarily pertain to the forecasting itself, but was just to have a document of what was up and coming and what the trends were around the country in terms of economics and housing and transportation, and general disruptors to the current, ways of moving forward. That was done in 2019, I believe, so it's completely out of date. But it's a stepping stone. And, and now that things are back open again and we can attend professional, just that community of getting new ideas and seeing what other people are doing, that's reopened to us. I think that will be a definite advantage for us at this point in time moving forward with your plan.
Well, I'm jealous because it sounds exciting.
It is.
It is. And
I didn't realize how excited I was about it until I was like, oh.
But you've raised something where we should maybe telegraph ahead of time. I think we said this maybe in one of our early meetings, that state law also requires you to say in your plan when it should be updated. When you anticipate updating it, we usually recommend just what Noah kind of intimated, and that is to update your plan every 10 years. We found that, by the way, we've learned from 2 other states we practice in heavily, New Jersey, which tends to do a review on 5.
Yeah.
We find that is onerous sometimes for a community to commit itself to that. But you may want to, that's a possibility. The other state is Connecticut. I'm somewhat biased. We do a lot of work in Connecticut. I think Connecticut's chosen well with the 10-year. We find the 10-year updates to be good. But that's an update. It doesn't mean that you can't, or your committee. For instance, in Southampton, we just charged the committee there to remain active, so that every year they would report to the town board, to the village board, in that case of the village of Southampton, how are you doing? How are you doing on the plan? Are you carrying it out? And that's where somebody could also say to you, hey, there's a new field here, there's something new happening. We ought to look at that, and it may need a plan update sooner than the 10 years.
Good.
I think the plan needs to be flexible. It's got to be dynamic, it's got to be fluid. There has to be checks and balances. So you have your year one priorities, your year 1 to 5 year priorities, 5 to 10 years. And as Frank mentioned, is that there needs to be feedback to you as the board as to these were the goals that were targeted for year 1 or year 1 through 5. Here's a report card. What did we achieve? What didn't we achieve? And what's new on the horizon? So there needs to be that kind of annual update to you so you know what's going on.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else anybody wants to add? Everybody's good?
Okay.
All right, you guys, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming
Yeah,
in,
thank
appreciate
you.
your time, and we're
And if you
excited.
guys are gonna, if you're not leaving right away,
Yeah.
you can use the small conference room in my office. Okay. Whatever you need to do.
Great.
Okay? Thanks.
Okay, thank you guys once again. Our next discussion item is with Ian Latimer.
Is he here?
And is Ian here? Okay,
Come on up.
come on up, Ian. And this is a presentation by NYSERDA regarding matters surrounding battery energy storage systems.
I have copies of the current draft law. If you all would like copies of it, I do.
I think the board has a copy. You guys sent it over. I think they have a copy. And it's been posted online.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Ian, good morning.
Hey.
Nice to meet you.
Morning.
I know we mentioned bringing a flash drive to share the presentation. I have that. Can I bring that to you over here? That would be the PowerPoint. It's the only thing not in this folder. There's not just one second to get myself together.
absolutely.
And we'll be good to go.
Absolutely.
How's everybody doing?
We're great. We're ready when you are.
All right, sure.
So I just, Ian, and I really appreciate you coming down, and I just, I thought it was necessary. We may know what battery storage is now, but the public doesn't know what it is. It's new. It's, it was new to me when I first heard about it.
Sure.
So I think you coming down from Albany is great, and I appreciate it. Thank
Well,
you.
fortunately, I have the pleasure of working out of our New York City office, so it's a lot easier
Oh,
for
so
me
it's a shorter
than
trip, okay.
than for my colleagues, which means I'm happy to make the trip
All right,
out.
great, thank you.
Not that they wouldn't be, but so let's see. Let me know once you're able to pull that up. I'll do the same on my end. All right. Just one here. So I'll note that there are just a couple of slight changes in the slides that will be pulled up here from what I sent over in the PDF, and I'll try and make those known where I can. Maybe before I jump into any of that, just to introduce myself to you as well as those of us here. My name's Ian Latimer. I'm a Senior Project Manager at NYSERDA. For those that don't know, NYSERDA is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So we've had a lot of hats that we've worn throughout the years of the authority. Primarily, we serve to implement clean energy programs as authorized by the state legislature and the executive agency of New York. And so we do a lot of incentive program administration, so administering money across the state for things like solar projects, wind, battery energy storage, and other clean energy technologies, such as everything from residential through commercial energy efficiency upgrades, things like that. So there's parts of NYSERDA that deal a lot with residential construction, commercial construction, clean energy technology deployment, things like that. I've had the privilege of working on a team called the Clean Energy Siting Team. Our primary focus is not on incentive administration, so we do not control what projects get awarded, who's getting funding. We exist to help communities and local governments prepare for clean energy development, understanding the critical roles that you all sitting up here and that you all in the audience have in determining where we're going to build projects, how we're going to build them, how we're going to regulate them, how we're going to pursue mutually beneficial outcomes for our residents and for the clean energy industry. So that's where we sit. You know, again, I'm unfamiliar with individual project details other than what I learned from meetings with towns like yours. Really, our resources and my team exists to try and sort of bridge that gap in terms of information and control over projects between our communities and our clean energy developers. So that's why we're here. I think Bob reached out to me because I was recently participating in a meeting put on by the Cutchogue Civic Association. Throughout the last few years that I've worked at NYSERDA, as battery energy technologies have come to the forefront, Long Island has been a critical focus, given your proximity to load centers, the proximity to oncoming generation through solar and offshore wind, things like that, which is why I'm always happy to make the trip out here. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm happy to be here speaking with you all today.
Can you, just before you even go into
Yeah.
your presentation, I think it's helpful for the public to get a better understanding of what our former governor, enacted the Climate Act in 2019 and how current Governor Hochul has expanded on that.
Yeah,
what
and
the
I'm-
goals-
I-
because I think what we're primarily going to lead into is that these are not just like projects that are ideas or independent. Some of these are going to be mandated by the state of where we have to be over the next few years.
I'm happy to touch on that. If you'll go to the next slide, please. I'll actually note. So the second item, and I'm happy to skip right to that if you'd like.
Sure.
I was planning to give a brief introduction to battery energy storage technologies, and then
you go through I don't want to throw you off.
Oh, no problem. There's no throwing off. We can hop around here. The second piece there is really about providing that context. So what are the New York State goals? What's the legislation supporting those goals? What are some of the programs and policies in place by NYSERDA and elsewhere to help administer and pursue those goals? And then we'll talk a little bit about energy storage specifically on Long Island. And then to the extent we have time or interest, I was happy to talk about the draft code that you guys had pulled together. Or I was going to maybe talk to Jeff about that after the meeting. So to the extent that's of interest, I'm also happy to have that conversation there. Yeah, so I mentioned myself, just a little bit about our team as well. Battery energy storage technologies is one of the areas that we focus on. We have a series of guidebooks available to communities and local governments, one on solar, one on battery energy storage technologies, one on wind, and then a recent resource that we made in 2021, it was published, I believe, was Clean Energy and Your Comprehensive Plan. So looking at ways to integrate clean energy technologies into a comprehensive planning process. I think you guys are well aware and acquainted with comprehensive planning at this point, so no need to belabor that point at all. But those are the resources we have if you're interested. You can go to the next slide, please. One more, perfect. So a little bit about battery energy storage systems to kind of focus on the smaller blocks and build out. So about energy storage itself. We want electrical energy. With increasing electrification around the state, driven in part by state policy, as we see more cars becoming electric vehicles, as we see more houses and buildings transitioning to being fully electric instead of reliant on natural gas for heating and other power, we are going to see an increasing amount of electricity needs across the grid. So we want more electrical energy, which is why we have more renewable generating technologies coming online. So energy storage itself does not always mean batteries. Really, an energy storage system just means any system that can hold and convert one type of energy to another. So sometimes that's kinetic or mechanical energy, which means you have an actual physical thing that is containing that energy. Sometimes it's potential, like gravitational potential energy or chemical potential energy. So examples include batteries. We also in New York and around the world have pumped hydro energy storage technologies, which I think I'm seeing a nod here. So you use power to pump water up to a higher reservoir, and then as that flows down, you can use that to generate electricity. There's also kinetic or mechanical energy storage systems like flywheels, which the photo on the far right is an example of a flywheel. Inside that chamber is a very large, very heavy mass that rotates at high speeds, and you can use that to turn a generator and create electricity. But really what we're here to focus on is batteries. If you go to the next slide, please. These are, again, examples of the different types of energy storage systems. I won't spend too much time here because I know we want to talk to the other pieces. But one more slide. The two main energy storage technologies dominant in the U.S. and specifically in New York, again, are pumped hydroelectric and then batteries. Some of the advantages of pumped hydro are that they are highly efficient, but the challenge is that you really need a specific type of location to be able to build a pumped hydroelectric facility. Where that is not the case is with batteries. So why do we like batteries? Because everything from my laptop to every phone that you have here, those are going to be lithium-ion batteries. You can scale that up to a very large scale. You can put it on wheels. You can have it stationary. There's all sorts of types of applications for which you can use these battery energy technologies, which is really exciting because the costs are falling and the potential is really high. There are limitations, which is why there's a lot of innovation happening in the battery space. But there are these advantages to batteries that other energy storage systems just cannot match. If you go to the next slide, please. In terms of what we talk about when we talk about a battery energy storage system, starting from the ground up, you have cells. When you wire those cells together, you get what's known as a battery module. When you wire those modules together, you get what's known as a battery rack. And it's important to talk about this because when you zoom down to the smallest level, a lithium-ion battery is a technology that we're all pretty intimately familiar with by this point, and the batteries in our phones and our laptops have a lot more in common with a lithium-ion battery cell than we think. It's really just about scaling that technology to a point where it can add value to the electrical grid. There are different types of batteries, as we all know, like lead-acid batteries, and using those for energy storage is not a new technology. Any, like information, what's the word I'm looking for? Like there's battery rooms at computer facilities, and those go back, to the 90s, the 80s, and earlier. It's just about changing the type of technology which can be more energy dense and more efficient than lead acid and other battery types. If you go to the next slide, this is just a chart that you guys can reference as you're interested, comparing why lithium-ion is the prevailing battery technology of choice today. It's much more efficient than a lot of the other battery types that are available. It's a lot easier to build, and that's manufacturing that's been scaling up and is continuing to scale up thanks to incentives implemented by the U.S. and the Inflation Reduction Act earlier last year, as well as other countries around the world. They're pretty cheap to operate. There's not a lot of maintenance that goes into lithium-ion battery facilities. And they're highly dense, which means you can take less footprint to store more energy than you can with other types of battery technologies. Next slide, please. We'll speed through the rest of this introduction to the technology, but want to make sure that this is helpful. When we talk about it, there's different types. You can go residential, commercial, utility scale systems. These are all photos of New York installed batteries. So again, to show a range that there's highly scalable systems. You can go from small, put it at your house, up to large, serving the grid size systems, which I think you guys are well familiar with, given the law and how you're looking to regulate the different types of systems. If you can skip one more, please.
Well, can I just ask you one question?
Yeah, please.
The battery management system, so there's an alarm that goes off if there's an issue, right?
Yeah, so you can actually walk it back. I'm sorry to gloss over that.
I think that's important for
Yeah.
the public.
Yeah, thank you for that. So when we talk about a battery energy storage system, we're not just talking about the batteries. There's all types of auxiliary equipment and other components involved in the system. One of which is a battery management system, which is basically the brain, the eyes, the ears of your energy storage system. And what that does is it monitors the activity happening within that battery down to often a cellular level. So that if there's any irregularity, any overheating or anything like that within the battery, that system is able to trigger an alarm, is able to notify the operator of what is happening. It's able to isolate systems to prevent thermal runaway, which is the spread of that overheating from one cell or one module to the rest of that system. These systems are incredibly complicated and very detailed, and any battery energy storage system which is going to be getting installed now is going to be equipped with this type of battery monitoring technology. They're really incredible. It's also required as part of the Uniform Fire Code. So you literally cannot be building a battery energy storage system without some type of very complex monitoring technology that's part of it.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. I think it's important to pause here because I think we're all still learning about the many different types of services that a battery energy storage system can provide to the electric grid. So it's important to talk about why we're doing this, or why these systems are important for the future of a resilient grid in New York State. If you know anything about the electric grid, you know that the transmission and distribution infrastructure is everything about the grid. Getting energy from one place to another is incredibly important, because it means nothing to create new solar and wind solar and wind farms if you're not able to actually move that electricity to where it's needed on the grid. It's also really expensive to build and update your transmission and distribution infrastructure. So one of the reasons that battery energy storage is important is that you can defer, or in sometimes even replace, the need for new grid infrastructure by building energy storage systems, which are able to, basically smooth out the creation of new electricity and the demand for that electricity. So that's where you're able to defer some of those upgrades. You may not need to spend, X million dollars to build a new transmission line if you are able to better control, when that energy is being put onto the grid and taken off the grid. You can also provide key ancillary grid services such as voltage regulation. We often have dispatchable energy resources like natural gas plants or oil plants, which, since they're always running, you can turn them up or turn them down, and you can really control exactly how much electricity is being added and taken off the grid, which is really important because at all times the grid demand and supply needs to be exactly equal. Electrical energy storage systems are really exciting because they also have the ability to be turned on and off very easily and very quickly, a lot easier and quicker than some of our operating power plants. Things like coal and gas plants, the ramp up is often pretty long. It takes longer to turn them on and turn them off than it does with a battery that's connected to the grid. It's also, energy storage is really important to support the integration of renewables to the grid. One of the critiques of renewables, and very rightly so, is that they are intermittent, which means they're not always producing when you need that power. So energy storage systems allows you to what they call energy arbitrage, or take that power when you have peak production but not necessarily peak demand, and bring it back onto the grid when you do have peak demand. So in the afternoons when we all get home, we kick up our feet, we turn on the AC, we turn on the TV, that demand grows more there. But that's not the time when wind farms like offshore wind off of Long Island are going to be producing at their highest capacity. So batteries enable you to sort of smooth that and better integrate the renewables that we're deploying in New York. And then critically, you can also alleviate congestion in the grid to help reduce brownouts and blackouts, which is not always of equal import all around New York State, but down here in the lower New York area, that is incredibly important to the health of the grid.
Can you pause just for a second?
Happy to.
So, out here on the East End, I don't know in terms of if you're familiar with our whole grid, but I believe like the spine of our grid comes like right out of like Holtzville and comes all the way out here as a main line. If there was a fire or something damaged, I've talked in prior meetings about setting up an emergency response program. If the grid could be shut down from like Holtzville, we could turn off that spine, or there was no power grid. Could battery power energy storage be put back into the grid to service things local here, knowing that the main grid is shut down?
It's a really good question. I'd say I'm probably not the electrical engineer to answer that question, but I'm happy to refer that to some of my colleagues at NYSERDA and see if we can get you a better answer. I know that the interconnection of the grid is incredibly complex, and the extent to which you're able to isolate certain parts of a line is not really my area of expertise.
That's where I have said is that that's where I want to start with the building blocks of like we need a mass disaster plan out here in the East End. We don't have it. That's what I'd like to see from years from now, is that we can cordon off certain areas of the grid and distribute power to certain areas.
Yeah. Well,
so that we can set up emergency housing or shelters and things like that and use battery powered energy storage.
Yeah, so I think that concept is often referred to as like a microgrid, where you're able to actually separate yourself from the main grid. I know that batteries and other technologies like hydrogen fuel cells are things that people are absolutely excited about for microgrid solutions. Generally speaking, though, that's not on a whole community-wide level. It's often a bit more localized around like hospitals or other key load areas. So I know batteries are certainly exciting as a backup opportunity for those smaller scale microgrids. As far as whole communities, I'm sort of uncertain about how that would work. But I'm happy to refer that question to others.
Thanks.
The next few slides can kind of just go into a bit more detail about some of the different applications and opportunities for energy storage, but to the extent that we want to use that time, I defer to you. If you want me to talk a bit more about some of the different applications, I can. Otherwise, we can go straight to that, New York policy and law angle. Do you guys have a preference?
I'd like to hear more information specifically to the governor's requests.
Sure.
On where we're gonna be.
Yeah.
I mean, she's telling us that we've gotta have 6,000 megawatts by 2030. That's 7 years out. That's massive.
Yep.
And I just think that we're trying to stay, at least, myself and talking to fellow board members, we're trying to stay ahead of it with enacting legislation, do stuff. I think if we sit idle, and in 7 years, this is her goal, and we wait 2 years for a comprehensive plan to be adopted, I feel like we're gonna be behind. We're kicking the can too far.
Yep. Understood.
Yeah, so you could skip this part, I think, if you want, that part to, right, into Ken's point.
So whatever you guys decide.
I mean, the large-scale renewables, I think it's also important on, I don't need the pages, it says large-scale renewables. Just how many of these projects have been approved? Because again, Riverhead, I don't want Riverhead to think that they're the experiment on battery storage. That's kind of the way it's been implied, and rightfully so, because most, you don't get around a lot, right? You get in Riverhead. So if you could get to there, because there's quite a few projects already been awarded throughout the state.
Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead with
Okay,
that. So
thanks.
why don't we skip ahead to slide 21, if you could go a couple more, yeah. And there's one slide I do want to come back to once we get there, but maybe this is a good place to start. So Councilman Rothwell, you mentioned the Climate Act in 2019. So for those that are not familiar, it's the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA, or the Climate Act. That was an incredibly important piece of legislation in terms of clean energy in New York. It set a number of economy-wide targets and specific technology targets for deployment by specific markers along 25, 2030, 2040, 2050. So all of these sort of interim marks to get to an eventual decarbonization goal by 2050. So some of the at-large goals as established in 2019 were to reach 70% renewable electricity by 2030, with a goal of 100% emissions-free power generation for the grid by 2040. You can see we've sort of fluctuated around 26 to 28% renewables for the last few years since that was enacted. Most of that being hydropower up in the North Country and out in Western New York, the NYPA projects. The ultimate goal, again, is to get to that 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And again, that's economy-wide. So that means power generation. It also means transportation emissions. It means building emissions. It's economy-wide. So you mentioned specific goals around energy storage. So you're right that it is now 6,000 megawatts or 6 gigawatts by 2030. That was not always the case. The original goals were 1,500 megawatts by 2025 and 3,000 megawatts by 2030. The reason that's doubled is because the rate of deployment has shown that we can absolutely hit those targets, which is why the governor wanted to increase that goal and why NYSERDA recently filed a roadmap for how we're going to get there. So that is a pending issue before the Public Service Commission. But we know that we're going to be able to create the right incentive structures to pursue that goal through the work that NYSERDA and the Public Service Commission is doing on this roadmap 2.0.
This has to be, it's statewide legislation, but it has to be to an extent somewhat balanced. We're not going to see like all of these projects up in Albany.
No.
Benefit the state. It's a statewide, where
Correct.
all towns throughout the state all have to consider this.
Yeah.
And be a part of this.
And so, to that point, when we talk about these technology-specific goals, sometimes when we go around the state and you meet with towns where it feels like you're inundated with solar, it's easy to feel like the only thing that the government is thinking about is solar, and that is, all of our bets are on solar, right? Couldn't be further from the truth. All technologies are on the table. The climate action, I'll take maybe one step back there. So the Climate Act, in addition to putting all these goals together, it also authorized the creation of a Climate Action Council, which was put together with representatives from all the New York State agencies that are relevant to this effort. It was put together with a number of other public partners and private partners across the state. And they have spent the last 3 years hashing out, creating a scoping plan, which is basically going to say, how are we going to get from where we are to actually meeting these targets? And that means what technologies are we looking to use? What are our strategies for decarbonizing these different sectors like buildings and transportation and power generation? And the result of that scoping plan, which I encourage you all to read, that came out in December, is basically, we need all of these technologies and more to meet our targets. So it's not just about large-scale solar, it's also about, what we can implement at the residential level for every single family home in New York. It's not just about wind, whether that's offshore or onshore, it's also about building new transmission and distribution infrastructure. So really all technologies are on the table, and it is a cross-the-state effort.
So if we just refuse to write any legislation, does that mean it won't come to Riverhead?
Far from it.
Thank you.
I would say far from
Nice way
it.
to ask that.
Yeah, I think the reality is that we need to see action at every community across the state. It's really encouraging for people to be thinking about it proactively. I think proactive work at the local level can help you have your regulations in place. It helps you be familiar with the technology so that you're not playing catch up once an application is before your board.
So I think we have residents feel that if we don't address it, we don't enact legislation, we don't move, then it's going to prevent it from coming here, and it's coming, regardless.
I would say that is the case, yeah.
Thank you.
Especially on Long Island, where there's so much excitement about offshore wind, as well as solar and storage. I think most, if not every town on Long Island is seeing applications, or at least is aware of rumblings of projects in their community.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I think taking the steps to adopt a zoning law, taking the steps to familiarize yourselves with the technology so that not every application is starting from scratch in terms of how you want to regulate it, and familiarizing yourself with that technology. I think that's exactly the way to go, and I commend you guys for the effort that you're undergoing.
I think by us enacting legislation, it lets us, lead the narrative of placement and so forth.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it allows you to define how you want to regulate these systems in your community. It allows you to not have to treat every individual project as its own one-off situation. I think the more that you can have a process in place for receiving and reviewing applications, the better. And I think it's better for the community as well to understand that to some degree, obviously you have to account for differences from project to project, but to some degree, the technology doesn't vary a lot from project to project. So much in the same way that you would have regulations in place to review like a hotel or another large commercial development, you kind of understand what you're talking about with that development. You just have to spend that time on the specifics of that site. It's a similar thing. You don't want to be starting from scratch every time you have a project.
But I think having a code in place, I believe it would protect us more from a public utility filing in Article 78 to just say, there's nothing in place, so we want to go here. I think it gives us a better defense to have a code in place, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
To that point, if you could actually go back 2 slides, that would be great. I want to pause on this because I think it's important when you talk about the, what happens if we do nothing, who's in control here, and I think that's always an important conversation when you're talking about permitting jurisdiction. In 2019, there was a piece of legislation passed called the Accelerated Renewable Energy and Community Growth Act. I believe that's it. Might have my words wrong. But that created a separate office called the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, or 94C is what it's often referred to, which changed the state-level permitting for large-scale renewable generation, so large-scale solar and wind projects. And I want to pause here because it's important to talk about the sort of permitting jurisdiction piece. So as of now, in 2023 in New York, projects that are smaller than 25 megawatts, the authority to permit is at the local level. So it's in accordance with your zoning regulations for like a 20 megawatt solar or energy storage or wind project. So you use seeker and you use any municipal requirements that you have on the books. For projects that are larger than 25 megawatts, those go through a state level siting process through the Office of Renewable Energy Siting or Article 10, which is what it previously was up until 2019. So those have defined regulations through which those projects are permitted. There's a carve out for projects that are between 20 to 25 megawatts where the project can elect to go through a state level siting process or choose to remain at the local seeker and municipal regulations level. So that's for generation, that's for solar and wind projects. Energy storage is a little bit different. So energy storage projects that are paired with a large scale renewable facility, like if I was building, like a 25 megawatt solar project and wanted to incorporate energy storage into the design of that project, the energy storage portion would get permitted alongside the solar at the state level. However, if it's a dedicated energy storage project, meaning I'm not pairing it with solar or wind, that's always going to get permitted at the local level, which means you need to be prepared for a project of that type to come through your municipality, because if it's not paired with solar, you are the ones who have to permit it. You need to be aware of the technology and have it's important to have regulations in place, to your point.
Could you go back to the Article 10? We've had 3 projects here in Riverhead and Calverton area. 2 of them were local secret and the other was in Article 10. Can you just go a little bit more into the permitting and then the process thereafter?
Yeah, so the Article 10 board was through the Department of Public Service, and it's no longer the primary permitting authority. I believe that was created in 2010, 2011, the siting board. And so they were the ones who ran the permitting process for large-scale generation up until that new office was created in 2019. So now the permitting goes through ORES, which I believe the latest project here was permitted by ORES, the new office, yeah. So it's no longer the way that those other projects would have been permitted previously. So that I can best answer your question, are you looking for?
I'm just looking for the distinction between the 2. Of course, the other ones that were permitted by this governing body, but the Article 10 is distinctly different.
Yeah, so it's possible that they had initially gone through those applications to the town before the state level siting process was applicable to large scale generators.
And is there communication in the process between the municipality and the state?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the new Office of Renewable Energy siting process, there is funding made available from day one to ensure municipal participation in the process. There are pieces of the regulations that require the applicant to engage the municipality to hold meetings prior to even submitting an application to the state. So the idea is that the community is aware of the project and involved from the outset of the process. In fact, I think that their application is not eligible to proceed through the process until they have had those pre-application meetings with the town. I believe that is baked into the process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Ian, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just slightly confused, maybe more than slightly. But when you talked about if solar is combined, and I'm going to give you an example. Right now, we're looking to put solar on our brownfield, right? So, and in that, part of that is to have some battery storage with that as well. Are you saying that we need?
So it depends on the size of the project.
Okay.
I'm imagining that your landfill project is probably not.
Hold on one second. I'm just going to ask Matt to come up for a second because he may have that answer already.
Oh, great.
Matt Charters is with our planning department.
Matt?
How you doing? I generally speak Bob's language, so I can probably explain it to him a little bit. So I think what we're saying.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, if there's a state level review project and they wanted to co-locate batteries, so Riverhead Solar 2 is a state level ORES
I'm talking
project.
specifically about the dump though. I mean,
Yeah, so the dump, that's not a state project. So he's referring to a state level review process. If they wanted
That's
to
all. Thank you.
co-locate the batteries, those batteries could come to, as of now, with a state level solar project.
Understood. Thank you.
Tell Bob thank you.
How do you say that?
Yeah, can you, for the rest of the people. Thank you, Go. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's helpful to continue to talk about sort of the other technologies before coming back to the battery piece. Offshore wind is a very hot topic, I'm sure. We don't need to spend too much time there.
We're not doing offshore wind.
Yeah, perfect. Well, maybe it's important just to pause there just to say that energy storage will follow generation. It follows the creation of that electricity. So the more offshore wind that is happening in the region, the more there's a need to store that energy in the region, which is why Long Island in particular, you're seeing a lot more dedicated energy storage projects as opposed to projects that are being built right alongside solar and wind farms, because these projects are coming, they're offshore. Some people, there is innovation happening in the space where they're looking to have the batteries, integrated with the offshore wind. But a lot of the times that'll happen after the electricity's been brought through on the transmission line to the mainland. So which is why you're seeing a lot of proposed energy storage facilities.
They're out in Montauk.
What did you say?
They're out in Montauk.
There's one in Montauk, one in East Hampton, but I think they're kind of all over. I mean, the thing is, once once that electricity is brought onto the grid, those electrons look the same as the electrons created by a plant that was burning oil, right? So it's not like you can exactly pinpoint one-to-one unless it's
It's
happening.
almost gonna have to be stored because the wind might not necessarily come the right time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what we were saying earlier. So generally speaking, wind at its highest capacity factor when it's making the most electricity is often at night. It's often in cold weather, which is not always aligned with our peak.
Dry
Peak
heat
demand. Yeah.
season, yeah.
So that is going to change, and one of the things that the scoping plan from the Climate Action Council is identifying is that the future of the grid looks a lot different than the grid we have today, primarily because the more that you electrify buildings, the more you electrify heat, your peak demand is going to change. Right now, our peak demand is in the summer when everyone's blasting their air conditioners. In the future, as we have more electrified homes and we need electric heat more, you're going to see a larger winter peak, which aligns pretty well with resources like offshore wind. It doesn't align as well with resources like solar. So as we can see, there's really a need for all of these different types of technologies, and energy storage plays a key role in helping align the demand and the.
Right, I didn't even think about it, but the winter days are shorter, so there's
Yeah.
not as much sunlight, clearly.
Yeah. So there's a lot to be done kind of across
Right.
the
And there's
space.
more demand for electricity with the time change, because
Right.
people are home when it's dark and lights are
Yep.
going on much earlier.
Absolutely.
Ian, just a quick question. In terms of NYSERDA versus the companies that are looking to put these storage systems in, is there a certification from NYSERDA? Do you have a list of recommended developers that do this, or companies that do this? I mean, we have a couple different companies knocking on our door. How do we know as a town board that they are recommended by NYSERDA, or is there a certification, or?
It's a good question. So I believe, and again, I don't work on the teams that administer those incentives, so I can't speak authoritatively. I know that our distributed solar program, which is called New York Sun, they have a list of NYSERDA approved installers for like residential through community solar scale projects. I don't believe that the energy storage team has the same list. I think that some of that is because the industry is just a lot newer, and a lot of these companies have not either built projects in New York or in the region, and so there may just be too nascent. That said, there is data available for all of the projects receiving NYSERDA incentives that are available, and you can see the companies that are involved in those projects. So I'm happy to share a link to that data, and you can see who's actually received NYSERDA funding for projects in the
Good,
state.
yeah, if you could share that with us, that would be tremendous.
Yeah, happy to. I will also note that you guys are uniquely positioned here, where NYSERDA incentives are available, but there's also money from LIPA that goes to these projects. I cannot speak for LIPA and the companies that they choose to do business with, so you may want to speak to them as well about companies with which they've entered into agreements. I will say one thing that's important to note with regard to NYSERDA and our support of these projects is that we do not administer public incentives to these projects until they are operating. So we are not, funding these projects from the outset. In order to participate in the NYSERDA programs, they often have to have reached a certain maturity threshold in terms of local permitting and other requirements. So at least on the solar side of the house, for example, these projects, until they are turned on and operating, they are not receiving incentive funds.
Would you recommend a BESS system be put in next to a residential community?
I think as long as it is in compliance with the very stringent code requirements, that is really what it's there to dictate. So I think as long as you're paying attention to setbacks, as long as you're paying attention to fire safety, I think that that's really the answer. In terms of the question at large, there are residential energy storage systems that I think are incredibly valuable assets for homeowners. If you want to stop paying as much money to your utility, one of the best ways to do that is to control your own, your own destiny in that way.
Right.
And again, we have requirements for energy storage systems built into the code for everything from residential systems to the large-scale grid systems, which is great.
Thank you.
So I think like anything, responsible development is what will allow that to be a good idea. I wouldn't say blanket it's a great idea or a bad idea.
Right.
Real quick, just to pull up this map, I think to sort of Bob's point earlier, you were asking about the projects. So every year, NYSERDA releases a solicitation for large-scale renewable projects. We've been doing this every year since, I believe, 2017 under this current structure. And we've awarded around 112 or over 110 projects since 2017 some of which are just coming online now, many of which are currently under construction, and it's a large pipeline that's going to be taking us out through 2030. You can see some of the numbers here, but I think maybe more importantly is to look at the map, to Bob's point earlier, where you can see large-scale solar, large-scale wind, hydroelectric repowering, so dams that were, reached the end of their useful life that are now receiving new turbines that they can continue to generate electricity. You can also see there's a couple of high-voltage transmission projects that NYSERDA is funding alongside other agencies, one of which is designed to bring power from Quebec down through the Hudson Valley to New York City, one of which is designed to allow for some of these large-scale solar and wind projects in southern New York to also come down to the lower New York area. So again, the idea here is just to show it is not all Long Island, it is not any one specific place. You can see solar, wind, hydro, all across the state of New York, everywhere from our rural areas to our urban areas.
Gonna build a dam in the Peconic River.
Couldn't be made.
Have a fish dam.
If you wouldn't mind just going to the NYSERDA Energy Storage Incentive, that's perfect. So currently, or to date, NYSERDA has had a couple of different programs for incentivizing energy storage. We've had a bulk incentive program and a retail incentive program. The bulk program is for projects that are 5 megawatts or larger. It has currently exhausted its funding, but I anticipate more funding will be added as part of this Energy Storage Roadmap 2.0. Like I said earlier, NYSERDA and the Department of Public Service are working out exactly the types of incentive structures needed to help us meet that 6,000 megawatts by 2030 goal. We also have had residential storage incentives available, which were only available on Long Island as sort of a test for the state, which has been incredibly successful. There's a lot of projects, and I'll show a map in a little bit that shows you the number of residential energy storage systems that have been installed across Long Island. There's still around $900,000 in that program, but they've got around $2.7 million total that was commissioned for.
Are these batteries or solar?
It's batteries paired with solar. So
Really?
it's rooftop solar and battery systems, which will often be installed in the garage or on the outside
Like
of the
the
house.
Tesla battery.
Like the
packs
Tesla
that they-
Powerwall, yeah, exactly. So that's one of the home energy storage products, yeah.
In regards to the lithium batteries,
Yeah.
I mean, yesterday there was a tragic fire in New York City in a child care facility that they believe was started by a lithium battery on a scooter that was being plugged in and charged. Guidelines for the type of batteries that are used, certifications, qualifications that these batteries must meet, that is all stringently.
Oh, yeah. So I'm really glad you brought that up, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, back in December, you guys heard from Paul Rogers,
Yes.
who's a former FDNY lieutenant. We work closely with Paul and the Energy Safety Response Group, his organization. So to your point, absolutely a concern. Fire safety, and if we go back to a couple, it's not that important, but if you go back to the primary land use local consideration slide, I noted there, with solar and wind, there's many land use concerns. We're talking about, impermeable surfaces. We're talking about, appropriate location and zoning and all of these things. And those are important for energy storage too, but really the number one concern with energy storage systems is fire safety. We want to make sure that people are trained. We want to make sure these systems are installed safely, which is why we invested as much time and resources into our code in New York for batteries as we have. Most of the battery systems most of the battery incidents in New York City and elsewhere around the country are, they are not the types of systems that we are talking about with energy storage systems. They're more like commercial products, scooters, hoverboards, phones, things like that. They are held to entirely different standards, if they are held to standards at all, versus what we're talking about for these electrical energy storage systems. So
Now, these would be guided by underwriter laboratories?
yeah,
or
so there's
NRC,
UL
or-
there's UL certification that is necessary for any project that's going to be installed under the Uniform Code in New York. It's not the same thing for a scooter.
Right.
Entirely different thing.
Well, that's
yeah.
part of the problem. That's what the fire chief was saying yesterday in New York City, that they get these scooters and they'll use a different charger for a different unit.
100%.
And it creates the problem, and that's why they're having it. And the batteries aren't the best quality that are coming in some of these units from
100%.
overseas, so.
Yeah, no one is issuing you a permit to buy a scooter
Right.
or buy a phone. It's just not the same type of thing. Yeah.
Also, these individual energy storage packs, each one is like self-contained in its own protection. It would be rare to have, you know, a fire in a battery-powered energy storage system that's going to keep connecting to the next one, on the grid. But, I mean, each one is outlined in fire safety as providing like a blockade.
Yeah,
between
so
each one.
there-
Where when you're talking about golf carts and scooters, there's no fire safety wrap similar to a car.
Yeah.
And so it's more easy to spread to the surrounding elements around it, where each one of these is encased, I think, which, correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, provides
Yeah,
a
so
better
the fire safety
factor.
protection and like the mitigation that's in place in terms of like sprinklers or other control technologies will vary a lot from system to system, but it is required by code that they have that be part of it. So some of the companies that are, manufacturing batteries in New York and elsewhere are implementing, fire mitigation strategies down to the cellular level, where individual cells are wrapped in like certain membranes that prevent the propagation of that, thermal runaway from cell to cell. Others do it at the module level, others do it with other, types of protection. But fire safety protocol is built into these systems from the outset. Otherwise, they wouldn't be compliant and could not get installed under our code.
We've been told in the past that if there were a fire in one of these, that the only way really to put it out is using copious amounts of water. Would there be any instance where spray foams or gels or any other type of substance would be applied to put a fire out on one
So
of
I
these?
think that the code, and I'd have to, pull up the uniform code. There are sections that talk about like clean agents and other, things that you can deploy to stop that. My understanding is that water has been the primary and best way to, put out or to suppress an incident. But my understanding is throughout the code there are other, opportunities for clean agents. I think that the challenge is that some of those products have their own, environmental and other considerations. A lot of the times they involve some of these forever chemicals, PFAS, that we are increasingly becoming concerned about.
Right.
And so for that reason and others, I think water tends to be the prevailing incident response approach.
I think most fire departments are getting away from that, and now we're doing more organic type foams.
Yeah, I'm sure that that's true. Yeah, I think Paul and his colleagues would probably be the best people to talk to about that.
Okay.
I'd like to change gears just a minute. We're a farmland community out here, agricultural. And as part of the clean energy across the state, I sit on the New York State Ag and Markets Advisory Committee. And I must receive, and I'm glad you brought up pictures that delineate where all these projects are going, because I must get 6 to 8 notices a day where these are going all over the place, because their concern is, or our concern is, that they're going on prime agricultural soils. Of
course.
And so they submit them to us to make comments on.
Yeah.
So certainly, for us, we're concerned about maintaining that balance between our ag soils and our productivity in agriculture and having the benefit of solar energy.
Of course.
So I don't know if you could speak to that as far as the statewide.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to, because it's it's one of our main focuses as well. NYSERDA works a lot with Ag and Markets through a couple of technical working groups we have focused on sort of identifying the root of the sort of conflict there, or the seeming conflict. So I'll say a couple of things. On the one hand, in terms of a more optimistic, forward-looking approach, that there's a lot of excitement and interest around how you can make clean energy and agriculture work together instead of being one versus the other. So my team, others at NYSERDA, have spent a lot of time learning about agrivoltaics, which is this new approach to integrating agriculture and solar together. There's a lot of research happening around the world about how you can grow crops under these panels, what types of crops, how can you best optimize them for production of continued use of the land. We've only seen small scale tests so far in New York and in the region for agrivoltaics, and most of that has to do with sheep grazing, which isn't always relevant from community to community. I'm sure you've heard about it as part of the work that you've done. There is other excitement and money that is going towards pilot projects to actually demonstrate the growth of crops under these panels. That's the more optimistic in the future approach. I think the more realistic thing that we're always looking at is how do you balance clean energy deployment with occupying farmland?
And that's what our advisory committee is up against every day.
Of course. And to that point, I think that this also just undergirds the need for local regulation as well. To the extent that you want to prioritize the preservation of your prime soils, the best way to do that is to have a law on the books which delineates, the amount that you can develop on those soils, which my understanding is that the draft code does address that, which I think is great. And I know that that's something that we've had built into our model solar law, our model storage law, all of those since the outset has been, let's prioritize developing not on our prime soils.
Sure. And we're very proud of our agricultural heritage here, so we want to maintain that going forward. So it's one of the things that we wrestle with locally, but I know that it happens all over the state.
Yeah.
And the same considerations that we have here.
Yeah, which I think that you're right to have that concern. I really do. I'll say, one thing about energy storage versus some of the other technologies is that the footprint of those projects is simply not what it is going to be for solar or even for wind. We're really talking about smaller projects. So like a lot of the time, you may need to secure a larger parcel to have site control to build a project, but a lot of the time you're not going to end up needing that full site for an energy storage system specifically. So depending on the size of the project, and my understanding in the draft code is that you guys have some minimum site requirements for the development of these projects. I'm willing to bet that you'll find that they're not even going to use the full site to build these projects, especially if it's accessory to another on-site use. So I think energy storage is particularly compelling with regard to how it can pair with agricultural areas without actually occupying as much space as some of the other technologies.
Excellent, thank you.
Just an FYI, to Frank's point, I would like to see New York State really, I understand what they want to do, but step up their game in terms of research and agrivoltaics. I've been looking at a lot of research in terms of what crops grow underneath it, and tomatoes. I'm not going to digress here too far, but New York State to me is always kind of lagging behind in that kind of stuff. But anyway.
Well, so the tomatoes and peppers down in New Mexico or Arizona, I forget where, that's definitely exciting. I think that we all, want to make sure that we're focusing on the types of crops that we often see in the region. I'll say that our team is hoping to put out a solicitation to focus on agrivoltaics research this year.
Oh, send it to me.
Oh my God, you'll be the first person on my email. You kidding me?
Thank you.
But I'll also note, I don't want to take away from the work that's already happening elsewhere. There's a couple of researchers at Cornell that have had federal grants to do agrivoltaics research and are continuing that. So there is work happening around the state. We are keenly interested to support that.
I don't want to, sorry.
You'll get your tomatoes, don't worry.
I just have a question. Why aren't standalone large-scale BESS applicants required to go through the 94-C process similar to utility-scale solar?
It's just the way the regulations are written. So the regulations for 94C apply to large-scale, or I think it's called their major generating facilities, which just means that it's specific to something creating electricity. Energy storage facilities do not create electricity. They take it, they bring it back to the grid, but they're not actually generating it in the first place. So it's just the way the laws are written. I'm happy to continue, but maybe there's a couple pieces that we can, if you go ahead to and then the next one. I think one of the things that's important to talk about is how energy storage can be complementary or replace other assets that are already on the grid. And something, on Long Island, but really in the downstate region at large that we should talk about are peaker plants. Peaker plants, I think it's something, I have the numbers here if you give me that. This is coming from this report that was put out by the Battery and Energy Storage Technology Consortium, a consultant of theirs, I think last year, maybe 2 years ago at this point. But it looked at the potential opportunities for replacing the peaker plant fleet on Long Island. For those that are not familiar with peaker plants, they sit dormant most of the year, almost all of the time, until it's summer and it's peak demand, and then they turn on. They are not held to the same. They're not held to the same standards in terms of like pollution and emissions as other power plants are, which means they're often worse for the environment and worse for our health. And they're expensive because we pay them to be ready to go at any time throughout the year, even though they're only actually operating around 10 to 15% of the time. the reason that this is of interest is because energy storage can play similar roles as, as a peaker plant can. Obviously, we're not looking at an immediate phase out of all, gas and oil-fired assets. Those are things that we are looking to phase out over time in pursuit of our climate goals. But energy storage can be a technology that's complementary or may even replace, the need for fossil generation and peaker plants in the region. I think that that's important because, depending on where you go around the state, I think a lot of people will say, like, well, our grid is fine. Our grid doesn't have brownouts and blackouts, and that may well be true. But some of the reason that you may not have that is because we're relying on, one, an aging fleet of peaker plants, and two, a fleet that is, really damaging from an environmental and a health perspective. Whereas batteries are, they're not going to have those same environmental or health considerations.
And we do have some brownouts now, so.
Yeah. So the next slide, you can look a little bit about the deployment on Long Island and sort of see in terms of like a heat map where you rank relative to some of the other areas of the state. Around 13% of New York State energy storage deployment is reflected on Long Island, around 15.8 megawatts thus far. 466 individual projects, which is 40% of New York's installations. So you can see that the percent of installations is a lot higher than that of the total deployment, and that's because of all of those small residential batteries that I was talking about earlier. And we'll show you a map in just a couple minutes that actually shows where those locations are. But Suffolk County by far leads the way in terms of versus Nassau. Not that we want to get into that, but 221 residential projects and 232 total projects. So that includes commercial, larger scale installations like the ones on Montauk and in East Hampton, and then the residential paired with solar. Next slide. As of the end of this year, or the end of last year, there's 4 towns on Long Island that have adopted regulations. A lot of those are using the NYSERDA model law, which I believe your draft code also does, which is great. And I think part of the value of that is ensuring that you are, not regulating these systems so differently from the other communities in the area. I think it shows that you guys are very much, in line with some of the other communities and how they're looking to regulate these systems, while also customizing it based on local priorities.
4 towns adopted code, but like East Hampton was forced upon by public utility, right?
I'm not sure what the permitting process was for the East Hampton projects. I think that those are LIPA projects, so I'm not really familiar with how those were permitted. But if East Hampton doesn't have a law, I'm sure that it was something that they had to do via a special use permit, a separate application. If you go to that project map, I know it's too small to really be that helpful, but each of those individual triangles is an energy storage project having received some type of NYSERDA funding. So it's not going to be comprehensive of every project because there are some that are LIPA funded. The map on the left does not include the single family residential, and the map on the right does. And you can see how many more projects there are on Long Island when you factor in some of those single family batteries that are paired with rooftop solar. Yeah, I mean that's kind of most of what I have prepared. I think the extent to which there is more questions, I'm happy to stay as long as you guys are interested in talking.
We kind of have, if anybody has questions, but I want to thank you very much.
Sure.
Really interesting PowerPoint, yeah.
Really appreciate you, taking the time. I thought you came from Albany, you only came out of the city.
Yeah, don't give me more credit than I deserve.
So you can come out more often, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of the code, I think, just in the absence of time, you could speak with Matt and Jeff. Right, Matt? Okay, yeah, okay.
You can always volunteer Matt's time.
Because we have other things on the agenda,
Yeah,
not to
of course.
push you away, but.
No, it's great. Yeah, and I'm happy to. I think that, from my initial impression that the code looks to be in great shape. I think you guys are, very much on the right track in terms of how you're proceeding, making sure that you're integrating it into comprehensive planning and things like that. So I would applaud you for the work that you're doing. I know it's not an easy
You
job.
gonna help us because we're putting a nuclear power plant in NetCal? Did that code?
Who? Me?
Supervisor Aguirre, did you want to add anything or have anything for Ian specifically?
Yes, I do, Ian. I want, this was enlightening. Thank you for the information. It is new. out in the East End. We know that it's not a new source that's being used throughout the United States, and this was something that we needed to do, and I want to thank Bob Kern for arranging this meeting. Again, it was enlightening to us, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more questions, and to Ken Rothwell, who who's also been on top of this. And Kern, Bob, I just want you, I just have a question on this. Apparently there was some information that was filed with the clerk on the past resolution. Can you somehow look at that and make a connection and check that out?
What resolution?
We can certainly look into
into
that
it.
for you, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about, right, Kevin? Devin, yeah, so apparently there has to be some connection. We got to get this right if we're going to go forward with this. But again, we're going to have a lot more questions. And again, thank you for making the trip out. And safe trip back to Albany. I hear it's cold out there.
I have one quick question.
Thank you, Supervisor.
I mean, we have limited substations where, that are
Yeah.
good relative location to put battery storage. Should we be looking at, there's one other that has potential. Should we be looking into that other one as well and getting close to that?
You mean like trying to drive projects specifically to co-locate like
Yeah,
by
yeah,
a
exactly.
substation? Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, and I think that this is, one of the issues you often run into with ag land as well.
It's not on ag land.
Sure. I'm just saying,
Frank
it's
would
your choices are limited for where you can build these systems to
Understood,
begin with,
okay.
right? So yeah, I would say looking to, be as close to the existing infrastructure as possible is always a good thing, in terms of cost to the town and cost to the developer, everything.
What incentives state giving Riverhead for partaking in this? Any money from the state to us for helping?
Ian doesn't sign the checks.
For projects, yeah, which
Yeah.
is true.
Who's that guy?
Well, generally speaking, I think that the sort of economic benefits to the town often come from the developers through pilot
I
agreements.
was being facetious, sorry.
Ian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We
Yeah,
appreciate
really
all your time.
appreciate it.
Before you run, Bob, I know you had asked the public for questions. Did you?
I did. What I did, Tim, as Ian was speaking, I marked off.
Okay,
What
because I have one
questions?
here that I received that I just want to
Okay.
ask before that I don't think was addressed.
Sure.
A recent BESS proposal included a switchgear that resembles a substation as an accessory structure. Is such a structure a customary accessory to a Tier 2 BESS, or does it depend on the location?
I would say it depends on the location and the size of the system. So the interconnection process, the way in which you tie like any kind of generating facility or a battery to the grid is incredibly complicated, and it highly depends on the location of the project. So some projects, depending on the available capacity at that substation or on that line, may need to build new interconnection equipment like a smaller substation for the project. So my understanding is that it highly depends on the size of the project and the location.
And the location,
And that
kind of what
some-
you said just before about they should be built fairly close to a substation, it makes most sense.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
easiest to
generally
connect.
speaking, if you are a developer looking to build a project, the first thing that you are doing is looking at a snapshot of the grid today and saying, where is there even room to add this project to the grid? Once you sort of have those pockets identified, that's when you zoom in and start looking at like appropriate sites based on zoning, proximity to other uses and things like that. Yeah, the interconnection equipment, some of that you don't know from the outset. Some of that takes those multi-year interconnection studies with the utility to determine. But generally speaking, the equipment needed will highly depend on the type and location of the project. Yeah.
And to that, I did miss one question. Somebody was questioning that if one of these things, and I understand now from when Mr. Rogers spoke, that it's not like one battery catches fire and it spreads to everybody else, right? But the question was about the toxicity. Should there be a fire?
Yeah.
Relative to what? To a car fire or,
You mean like comparing those one-to-one?
something, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern, and it's a real one. I would say it's a concern insofar as any type of structural fire or vehicle fire is a concern as well. I would defer to Paul and his expertise as sort of the fire safety experts there, but my understanding is that they've studied things like toxicity in water runoff, and you're finding similar, similar chemicals in the runoff from a battery fire as you would a structural fire. It's similar to my understanding.
And are there like Ansel systems inside these containers? So are there compression systems? So it's like an Ansel system in a restaurant, right?
I don't know what an Ansel system
Okay, so
is.
what happens is you see a hood over a stove in a
Oh, sure.
restaurant?
Yeah.
Right, so what they have is really high compression. So if there's a fire, and what happens is it just sets these high compression, deluges it to put the fire out.
Sure.
Are they
It's a
inside
fire
it?
suppression
Yeah, I
system.
got
and
it.
I
It's a
think these
fire-
individual cells
Yeah.
have them from what I've read.
So it'll depend on the project and on the specific type of system. Sometimes they use like deflagration venting panels, whereby as pressure builds up, it releases it to the atmosphere. There was a pretty high-profile incident involving a battery in Arizona a few years ago, and
That's
one
what
of,
everyone talks about.
everyone always talks about it for good reason, because I think it drew attention to the need for fire safety protocol. The challenge with that system is that there was no ventilation, so the gases built up and they built up. When you open that door, it changed the pressure, and you got an explosive event. So a lot of the code requires venting to avoid the buildup of those gases to begin with. And I'll say that a lot of the larger energy storage projects have actually moved away from using, closed like buildings. A lot of them are using more modular, containerized systems, which are all built in with their own ventilation, and that can avoid the need to actually, go in and enter the room where these systems are. And I'll note, just as a closing point to that question, that the code requirements for things like ventilation and fire safety there's different scenarios for every type of system. So if it's a dedicated use building, if it's a container, there are special rules and regulations that are tailored based on the specific types of installations. So we tried to cover that all, and I think that the code that you guys have as a draft defines and calls out some of those different types of projects that you can see as well.
Great, thank you. Again,
Excellent
Ian,
presentation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you very
Ian,
much.
thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you.
I don't think anybody can dispute that you are well-versed in all things battery energy storage. So,
I am fortunate to stand on the shoulders of giants here. People like Paul Rogers and others, thank you very much.
Do you know why my phone isn't working? No.
Very great. Yeah, let me get that. I get this, Paul. But yeah, so to the extent that there's interest in further discussion from us or other contractors, please don't hesitate to let us know. We really want to be here for the community.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
thank you, Ian.
And Bob, thank you for setting this up. This was
So
great
Commissioner
idea,
Ball has
very
a
informative.
specific question. I'll just have him
Appreciate
get in touch with you.
Yeah,
You started it,
perfect.
Ken.
Yeah,
No,
tell him I say hi. And then, so
Yeah,
he,
absolutely.
the commissioner and NYSERDA leadership sit on this agricultural
Yeah.
working group, the Farmland Protection Working Group, as you probably know. Yeah, I don't know the extent to which he's our biggest fan, but hopefully we're working together.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next discussion item, which
Ian, thanks again.
is about a possible code change regarding Chapter 301, Downtown Riverfront Business Overlay District. We'll ask Don Thomas, our CBA Director, and Town Attorney Eric Howard, and also Deputy Town Attorney Danielle Hurley to come forward.
We're not taking a lunch break?
No, I wanted to thank him.
Devin ordered lunch. He's waiting for it till 11.
He's been very helpful, phone calls, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Close, still morning.
Still morning.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So we'll get right to it because I know we are on a little bit of a schedule
Right.
with BFJ. So over, the past few years, the board's been working carefully to make downtown a better place and revitalize the area. And over more recent years, we've noticed some increases in some things that are undesirable downtown, some panhandling, some uses that may not be as consistent with the,
Excuse me, Larry, can you turn Dawn up a little bit, please? Thank you.
uses that aren't consistent with the board's direction with the town square and the TOD and just, that general thrust towards revitalization. So, thinking about the things that we could do to help, and there are quite a few things that we are working on, but the one effort in particular is the one you see today, which is two code changes. One is a zoning code change, and it would be an overlay district on the bid area. which would limit some uses in that area. So for instance, we proposed limiting laundromat uses. We proposed limiting vape-type shops, things that are not family-friendly, and then those types of uses in general. And so those would be the zoning end of it, and that overlay would just be, on that area. And could be extended if the board wanted it to go in other areas too. It could go up to Polish Town, for example, or someplace like that. It's just important, I think, to move it forward as quickly as possible so we don't send the wrong messages to business, potential businesses. We want them to know where we want them to be and be clear. And then the second is sort of it's an amendment to the zero tolerance zone code, and I'll let Eric kind of handle that.
Yeah, so chapter 297 is something that we already have on the books. It's not something that I've seen often enforced since 2017. Essentially, it identifies certain types of violations that already exist under town code, including open alcohol violations, urinating in public, littering, noise, loitering,
loud music,
graffiti, things like that. Those are already identified, and it was initially implemented for the business improvement district. So we'd be looking to expand that chapter to include this overlay district, and then also expand on some personal conduct type violations that would also be violations under the town code, and something that hopefully we could deter in order to preserve that family atmosphere, tourist atmosphere that we want downtown.
Exactly. I was going to say, I'd spoken about this with Dawn, 6 months ago, about the idea of an overlay. And the idea was not so much to prohibit uses as it was to encourage family uses in that area. But certainly these kind of code changes with enforcement will go to the overall goal to make it family-friendly, to have things that are accessible to tourism and drive our economy down in that area.
So,
Right, and just on the uses quickly, so some of the uses that are going to be listed here are not necessarily sort of offensive uses. It's just the types of uses that you wouldn't want taking up space in this overlay district.
In this
right?
specific
So
spot.
like car washes,
Right.
fueling stations, urgent
Fraternity,
cares,
sorority
hospitals.
houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not so much, that it's something that
If you
may
build a
not be
town square and you
necessary.
surround it with gas stations, it has less desire to,
Right.
entertainment factor.
consistent with
I
the
suppose.
activation plan that you
No
just
longer a
adopted,
destination.
and also, just like an aside, we looked at, this panhandling issue. Your right is, under the Constitution, is to be able to ask somebody to give you money, but aggressive panhandling is different. And so we're trying to differentiate those things to preserve people's rights to do what the law allows them to do, but also not to disrupt the other person's life to the degree where they don't feel comfortable. And so those are the sort of things that urinating in public, or, pulling garbage out of dumpsters, or public garbage cans.
Sleeping on benches.
Yeah, sleeping on
sexual
benches.
lewd conduct,
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah, so all of that's addressed.
Agree 100% with everything here, but it means nothing if we don't have enforcement. Chief, that's where we really have to work with the police department and increase what we can and what we can't do, especially in the downtown area,
Yes.
to stop this from happening, because it's happening. And it's been a complaint of many of the business owners recently downtown, and it needs to be addressed. And they don't want to say that the police department aren't doing anything, because we've had meetings with the chief, and we know things have changed down there in terms of police enforcement. So we're going to continue that route, and we want to make sure that if that's working, fine. If it's not working, then we need to bump it up some more. And we want to make sure we get control of this before it gets out of control.
And some of these are town code violations, so town code officers
Right,
can write those
code
tickets as
enforcement
well.
also.
So it expands that opportunity to them for that type of.
So I think the overlay zone in particular and the code changes would be a coordinated effort with the police department to make sure that this is all going in the right direction for
Yes.
family-friendly tourist area.
And we thought it was important to sort of put it in as soon as we could, and then if changes need to be made, we can do that, you know, as they need to be made, but at least we're starting and being clear about what we're wanting and expecting to happen downtown.
Yeah, it's really the expression of intent and getting the purpose formalized and implemented, I think really helps us sort of direct any kind of, you know, amendments that we need to make.
Yep.
You know, we have seen, Chief, I think you can back this up, we've seen some improvement down there with the recent additions that the chief has done. But I also am aware that it's January, it's not July.
Yeah.
And in January, you have less people outside sleeping on the benches and doing some of these things because of the weather.
Yes.
So we're gonna have to monitor this as better weather comes and more people are outside. We have to stay on top of this.
And this is just the one piece of an overall strategy that we've been working on together to, you know, address some of these issues. We're talking to some of the building owners, we're talking to some of the businesses, and, you know, and some of the community members working as a team to sort of make sure everybody has all the right information, everything's current, and we're, you know, moving all together in the same direction, so.
And the cooperation has been good so far from some of the building owners and company
Yes.
owners they don't want that reputation, and then we met with them, and I thank you for setting that up, and it's worked out really well so far, and
Yes.
fingers are crossed, but we are gonna continually monitor it, and they've jumped on board to wanna have structured meetings every so often to make sure we can clean this up and that it doesn't revert back.
Yep. So there you have it.
So next step in the process would be to go to a publish and post, and then we
Yes.
have a public hearing following that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And we did discuss the secret issue earlier, which will need to be done, obviously, but it can be done contemporaneously with the process of the local laws adoption.
Unless, you know, Jefferson tells me otherwise, and as soon as we schedule for public hearing, you know, we'll start that coordinated review process.
Okay, good.
How will this affect businesses that are already there that we're looking to prohibit?
I think to some degree they
They would already be vested.
would
They
be,
would be vested and somewhat grandfathered in, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, they would be pre-existing non-conforming use.
But you need to look at, something was brought to my attention, I don't want to, but we need to look, somebody said one of the businesses was permitted for X, but they have extended what they're doing.
I mean, to
So-
the extent that anyone's inconsistent with their use permit or certificate of occupancy, that would be an enforcement tool that we already have.
yeah.
Oh, good.
It's
Then,
it would
you
be
know,
an illegal use
Right.
to begin with, so
Because
that's
I wanted to open up
that's
a
helpful.
rental place, car rental, yes, I can. The only thing I'd say, don't some hotels have car rentals? I've seen that around the country. I think Indigo has one. I mean,
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
we can work on,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
things that we can,
This
now
is
that, once you have a public hearing,
an
you'll
issue.
get that public
Yeah.
input. You can ask some of the stakeholders downtown, send them a copy, see if they have any thoughts on
Yeah.
what we're thinking about, and, you know, weigh in, and then amend, and then publicly hear, and off we go.
Right.
This is a great start. Thank you.
Supervisor, do you have
Thank you.
anything to add to this particular conversation? No, okay.
Yeah. I think it's good. It was a long time in the making, and it's coming all together. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, guys. So we'll have it in the queue in Minitrack for the publish and post. Great.
Sounds like fun.
Thank you, guys.
very much.
Okay, for our last discussion item today, we have Anne Marie, Deputy Town Attorney Anne Marie Prudenti, and I know Councilman Kern, you've been involved with this as well, and also we have Dean Del Pret from Cousins Paintball. Hi, Dean.
How's everybody?
And Bob, did you want to introduce this topic?
sure.
Patiently waited 2 hours, Dean.
I'm pretty right. I was hoping I would be first.
Oh, right, and great, that's great. We have Ray Coyne
Ray's
here,
got it. Come on.
our
Ray,
recreation superintendent here as well. Hi, guys.
Did you bring the pickleball rackets, Ray? Okay.
Tired, long week. Not even over yet.
So I'll make it real brief. So, you know, the idea of, you know, bringing the hockey rink, bringing the soccer, and also the need to supplement electricity in the hockey rink, I thought it was a good idea. It actually, this is, and the need, and bringing Dean, basically utilizing land that Riverhead has, specifically the park, and the there's a section of that park that probably hasn't been used for 200 years. And I asked Dean if he would be interested in leasing that, from doing a license agreement with the town and operate his paintball there, knowing Dean and knowing what he's done on his other property, doing a lot of community events and very community-involved guy. And I put him together with Emery and Ray, and that's it. So I have nothing to do. Go ahead, Emery.
So basically what the proposal is, it would be a license agreement to utilize a portion of Veterans Memorial Park. Just to give you a little bit of history about it. So back in early 2003, the then town board decided to create a town park on the EPCAL site. Was never formally made a separate and distinct lot. But at that time, and through a series of resolutions, all which I recite for you in the proposed resolution, I don't want to bore everybody because it's been a long work session already, 62 acres was designated town recreational park. And we accepted money from the state of New York, and I believe even possibly the federal government, to make improvements to that 62 acres. Since then, and over time, we have changed the lines, believe it or not, of the park. And nothing is formal, because we don't have an approved subdivision yet. But just to give you a little bit of history, so just backtracking a little, in 2004, the town board adopted a plan by Aries Design to create this 62-acre park. That's what we've had, quote, on the books and dedicated to town park. But since then, and over time, beginning in probably the first indication I have is in, so I'll just show you a picture. This, you can each take a copy. This is basically way back when we first started talking about developing EPCAL. Well, actually, our second round to try to revitalize our efforts. That's the configuration of the way the park looked.
So Anne Marie, just to let the folks in the audience know, we'll post a copy of this immediately following work session online so people can get it. Do you have any additional copies with you?
Yes. So I'm also going to give you, this is the Aries design, and you will notice it meets the configuration of the 62 acres. So that's what we've been dealing with and looking at. I think you all have this. Sorry about it. So, Ray, as Recreation Superintendent, has diligently pursued the recommended improvements by Aries Design. And you can see from the pictorial I provided to you that was directly taken from the Aries Design proposal adopted by the town board in 2004. Our ball fields are in place. So over time, beginning as early as 2013, the town proposed in its 50-lot subdivision, they did a proposal to expand recreational use on and along that area. Because again, I'm going to say that area, it's not an approved lot. So please keep that in mind. Sorry, I should really count them out first. Let's do that. Sorry. So what you're looking at is in 2013, the sketch plan for the scoping hearing on the proposed subdivision of EPCAL now expanded 62 acres into 92 acres. Then, in 2014, in the proposed draft subdivision, supporting a draft supplemental generic environmental impact statement. I know this is like way too much. I know, I'm sorry, guys. You'll notice it changed from the proposal I just showed you, which was 92.4 acres, and then it became 96.7. Then, sorry, guys, I have to,
I need more drawings.
because I'm gonna get to the
Nothing but
meat
thorough.
of where, I'm gonna get to the meat of where the proposed paintball will be, and why. So as part of the final supplemental generic impact statement, the subdivision was amended, and the proposed area for recreation became 93 acres. Last one, I promise, guys, I promise. In 2017, the town embarked on a plan for a 8-lot subdivision. The 8-lot subdivision dedicated additional acres over and above the 93 in the 2016 FSGEIS, and now we're at 98.9. This is the 8-lot subdivision. So everybody's probably asking, why am I torturing you all with all these maps? Because, did I skip one round behind this? Oh, no.
I think we got it.
This is the one. So when, I skipped another one.
Here's extras of the most recent one, if you need it.
So, when Ray and I met with Dean and spoke to Dean, we determined a appropriate area for the paintball. A portion of that area is located just behind the dog park and part of the 62 acres, which are under the public trust doctrine. The other approximately 6 to 8 acres under his license agreement is the additional acreage, which is never been improved, technically not an official lot yet, but created in the environmental studies for recreation. And that's where we're proposing that he locate. This is a really bad map, and you can probably tell because I did it myself.
It's a children's book.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
We have people that can do that.
I know. I really should have got somebody. So what this map shows you is area for parking, proposed, labeled A, the license area for Dean. Again, a portion which was part of the 62 acres under the public trust doctrine, and the other acreage is not. Nonetheless, I've prepared this as a license agreement. A license agreement gives him no property rights in the property. And we reviewed that. Also, there's a termination provision if we need it for municipal purpose. Also, there's a requirement that he must present to Ray for his approval the proposed schedule for use. He must coordinate with Ray programs for our youth, and Dean can probably talk about. I was really surprised there's paintball for children. I wasn't aware of that. And basically, and he is not permitted to affix anything permanently to the property. It's a license agreement, in every sense of the word. So I have the resolution, a draft of the agreement. I would distribute it today. However, Ray, Contesta, Dean, and myself have been working on, we're going to make 1 or 2 changes to the electric. He has a license fee, and I don't want to misquote it, I think it's $5,000 a month. $5,000 a month. And he will not be permitted to utilize the property in the month of January because of
You don't want to get
hunting
anybody
season.
shot, yeah.
Yeah, so even though,
That makes it more fair though, doesn't it?
No, with the real gun in the face comes out.
so in addition, what we're going to require, because when you think about paintball, we're requiring Dean to net off every paintball field. So even while it's netted off, it's still too dangerous to have
A real gun?
residents out in that particular area during that particular time, because it's right in one of the hunting sectors. So, I want to talk a little bit about, and maybe show, like,
The netting and
Yeah.
the safeguards? Yeah, so we looked at it, and we're right up against that bike trail. So obviously, we're in the same boat. Our primary focus is safety, right? The injuries are the kiss of death for us, and we've been operating for 25 years. We don't have injuries. We've had a trip and fall once in a blue moon, but we don't get a lot of injuries. So the primary barrier for a paintball is netting. So we're going to use 2 things. We're just going to net the entire length of that property. And I did bring some netting, get a sense of it. It's specially made netting, just specifically for paintballs. They're made to stop paintballs. They're UV protected. They're engineered for the force of a paintball. It's not just some netting I buy in Home Depot. This is expensive netting. The height of it is guided by insurance companies, so it's got to be a minimum of 12 feet for our insurance regulations. Typically, we use 16 feet, so there's, you got some topo things here, which we may use some 16, some 12, but, we'll make it safe. And then, in addition to where the netting is, there's just a physical safeguard. So if the netting's 20 feet off the line, we're going to still be 50 feet off of that. So there's no chance that a paintball is going to come and interact with someone using the bike park, the bike parks at all.
So let's talk about the waivers, instruction. That's all part of it, and it's all put in the license agreement.
Yeah, so some of this is so common for me. 'Cause-
Dean, you just want to sit up a little bit so the mic can pick you up.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of this is very common for me, because in our industry, it's just standard, nobody goes out without a safety orientation. Nobody goes out unattended. Our staff is trained how to foresee problems, how to educate that consumer when they come out there. Hey, this is a rental gun, this is where you can shoot, this is where you can't, where to put the goggles on. There's signs everywhere. It is like remarkably safe. Early in our fledgling industry, we knew the problem was there was this, you're shooting people with paintball guns, right? So the perception was someone's going to get hurt. But early on, we adopted all these great safety guidelines, and as an industry, we're super safe. There's less injuries than skiing, than so many sports. It's really, really safe. And
We've got 5 locations, so we're kind of pros at this, you know. I brought waivers with me. Everyone signs a waiver. I brought our rules, I brought safety guidelines. I don't know if you want to see them, if you need me to submit them. You know, we're super, super safe. And again, everyone, when they start working for us, the first thing is safety. Then it's about the experience. And hopefully, if we do the first 2 things right, we have a profit at the end of the day. That's the plan.
You might
So-
have missed it, but how many acres are we talking about?
So it's going to be approximately 14 to 16, I think. We're going to finalize it in a kind of walkthrough with Ken Testa. Dean's already met Ken out there, and he's also been working with Ray.
Yep, we went the other day.
And of course, I provided the draft license agreement to Ray before even presenting it to the town board or to Dean, just to make sure it met with Ray's approval.
Dean, in comparison to your other operations for paintball, how is this size-wise?
It's about the same as where I am now.
They're all about the same?
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is gonna be a little bit smaller, but there's a little bit more functional space for us, so, yeah, it's about the same now.
How do we mitigate wildlife? So when we're putting up this fencing and so forth, is the entire perimeter of 14 acres fenced in and nothing's going in, nothing's going out? Or is this like netting that's shifted to allow deer to pass through? So tell me a little bit about wildlife.
So we could do it anyway. We could do it either way. We've done it before where we've shifted and it had an area where deer and animals can come in and out. So we can do it that way. In our mind, it was like the front entrance where the dog park is, or actually no, to the left where the parking is going to be. That would be open. So if someone parks their car, they just walk over. It's a no shooting area. There's no risk of anyone shooting. It's where you would check in, then you would move to another section, get your rental equipment. Once you get your rental equipment, you go into a netted area. So there's a big section of it, probably 25% of it that's not going to be netted. That's safe to be not netted. And then the other parts, we can stagger some netting. As a matter of fact, when we come back all the way towards the end where that bike path turns, we may not even be over there, so there may not even be a need for netting at all. So maybe that's a great place to stagger it. But yeah, we can stagger netting. That's not
And I think people will ask, paintballs, all biodegradable,
Yeah,
non-hazard.
I knew that question was coming. I actually brought balls, and I brought a MSDS, which is a material safety data sheet on the paintballs in case I can submit it. But I did bring it. Yeah, it's all water soluble, non-hazardous, non-toxic.
Bob was gonna prove it, you were gonna eat some of these?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dean, did you bring me something and pass to the board members?
I did bring some paintballs also.
No, don't you?
I was telling Anne Marie, our industry is, we're always changing. So you can see this ball here. This is what a standard ball looks like. It's a 68 caliber ball. But our industry realized, it's got more of an impact. So we've now got 50 caliber balls, which are easy. You can see, you can store them in less material. There's less impact, what they call joules. And it doesn't take the wear and tear for the nets, because these nets only have a life. You can only hit them with a paintball for so long until they finally have to wear down. So these actually reduce that, softer impact, and now they have even smaller, tiny, tiny little balls that shoot through these little, like, spring-loaded guns that we do parties as young as 5 and 6 years old. So that's what Emery was alluding to.
So going back to the area, if I may ask, couple things. So this part area is designated as parkland, and the other portion is not necessarily parkland, it's just, we just deem it for recreational use, but it's not part of the parkland now, right?
So with these 62 acres, to be clear, and I tried to really research every avenue I could find. As to the 62 acres, you definitively have town board resolutions creating the 62 acres under the public trust trust doctrine. And by taking grant monies for construction of improvements on that 62 acres, without a doubt, public trust doctrine. As to the additional acreage, I can tell you throughout the studies, it's recreational use. So if you said to me from a study point of view, would it be appropriate to put a commercial or industrial building on that additional acreage? Answer, no. It's recreational use. I have found nothing wherein we dedicated that additional acreage or accepted monies to improve it from county, state, federal agency. But we all know that because it's vacant. It's unimproved. We haven't invested a dime in it.
So to give the general public an idea of where the area we're talking about, so the soccer fields where you see is the large open grass fields, that remains part of parkland, but it really falls into place where the new ice rink is going to be proposed to be developed and placement. That's going to be not in parkland, but just in recreational designated area. It stays outside the bounds of parkland.
Yeah, so the map I showed you, and the reason why I showed you the Aries design map, it gives you the dimensions, and it describes to you what was the 62-acre site that was the subject of the series of resolutions I recite in the resolution that I would put before you. The area outside of that, and if hockey were to be outside of that, again, in my opinion, study-wise, it has to be a recreational use, but does it have the same significance as the 62 acres? I haven't found anything in our records. And what I was trying to demonstrate to all of you is the 62 acres is not a separate lot yet, never has been. And the evolution over time of this additional acreage has gone back and forth and back and forth. It went, from 92 to 96.7, back to 93, then to 98.8. It's ever evolving, and regrettably, you all are aware, we don't have a approved subdivision yet. Potentially in the future, you don't know, if you're still vested with the property, you may change it. You may create recreational lands to the east. At one time, prior to the 2013 map, some of you may recall, there was even talk we were going to do a mobile, like a camper park to the east of what's shown to you as the 62 acres. And that idea floated around for a year and a half. And the thought was, well, we're going to expand the 62 acres, not as a public trust. We were going to add on additional recreation for campers and make it a campsite. I mean, I don't know if any of you remember that.
So that would have been a town,
Yeah.
that would have been a town project. So it's my understanding, the only time Riverhead took money from the state, county, or the feds is from this 2003 map.
Of
The
course,
62 acres.
The 62 acres, that's.
Of course,
Right.
except for the walking trail.
Okay.
That's also public trust, the walking trail, without a doubt.
So what do we need to do to solidify this, that it now stays at 98.9 or whatever it is?
Well, we're under a contract of sale,
Right?
which now is going through the joint application process. We, because the agreement of sale is for the 8-lot subdivision, at this time, because we're under the contract, we can change it. So it's not going to revert back.
It's not going to revert back to less than what's there, what we are
No.
talking about today.
And
Not
I think-
unless-
I think we should keep it
Not
separate.
unless, at some point in time, it's determined that the entirety of EPCAL vests back in you, then it's going to be your obligation and to keep watch that it never reduces and perhaps even expands.
Expand it, yeah.
You know, but that's going to be your obligation, because it's really quite amazing when you look at it historically, how it went back and forth. And I think we were fortunate in the proposed 8 lot that it was much larger than the 2013 or the 2016 version. So, sorry I was long-winded.
Two things, go ahead.
No, the only thing I was gonna just ask, I'm sorry, is the $55,000 a year. Basically, that's gonna be our income for 11 months. I just would encourage, and I would ask fellow board members, that this money does not go into the general fund, that this, you know, a project like this, it's great income, and so, one point Bob was mentioning, you know, maybe it helps with the electricity for recreational purposes up the ice rink, but other things directly, I think, you know, it stays within the recreation budget, and it's just added to raise, you know, a budget overall, that we're not making money on one entity, putting in the budget, and then he's still struggling financially to increase parks, that if he's gonna be in the park, then it's gotta benefit the park, and the money's gotta be reinvested in that park.
We can certainly do that, and Ray and I have done that before. So when we did the license agreement for the TAG building, there was a provision in there that 5% of the monthly license fee, or total annual, goes into a park and recreation fund for maintenance of Stotsky Park. So we can certainly do that. I mean, a 62-acre, the existing 62-acre park, in and of itself, is a lot to maintain.
And it's just the idea that if somebody ever felt that I've been, you know, I can't utilize walking through the woods over here or something where there's paintball, for example, I'd like them to also be able to say, yeah, but now I got water fountains, I got additional swing sets, I got additional amenities, you know, in that same park. I got repairs to the EPCAL trail, or whatever it may be. I just think that, you know, it's a park that sometimes has difficulty getting funding specifically for. So I think that a project like this, the funding stays within that particular park.
It makes perfect sense. Ray, I have a question for you, Ray. If the opportunity does come up where we can expand, you know, to the east, and to what you were saying earlier, Emery, I mean, I think you have like a former plan that can be looked at to do that, if that opportunity, like if you want to expand by 10 acres to the east, you know, should we get that opportunity? You would,
We don't have
We don't
that
have
plan.
a plan for that now. We have a plan for the park itself that we're trying to.
but I'm just talking about if the opportunity came up, right, to what you were saying earlier, right? If you wanted to add 20 acres, just to have it, so that in 30 years, whatever, there's that 20 additional acres to that park.
We can have plans for sure, yeah.
Okay, just a question, thank you.
And now, in terms of the hockey rink, I know it's a whole different setup, license agreement and everything. Dean, would you have some sort of discount for Riverhead residents, or Riverhead Day?
I have to
or-
figure something out. I've been doing that for years anyways. It's not a big ask for me. Like Bob mentioned, I'm super community oriented. So yeah, and I've had the kids from the rec department down at my place in the past. So yeah, I would do something.
Yeah, that type of thing, if they set up something through recreation, or?
Yeah, I just have to figure it out
Yeah.
operationally, and then like, you know, again, you know, all the kids who work for me, they're all from Riverhead High School. My managers are from Riverhead High School, so I'm like super organized, you know, like community centric. I even developed a program with one of the homeschool systems. So they were having, when COVID was big, they didn't have the opportunity to have a rec class. So, but it had to fit a certain criteria for the state to kind of sign off on this was a legitimate rec class. So I worked with the school system, and we built a little paintball program with 10 kids. They would come, it was a learning environment, counted as a rec, and they got credit for it. So
Good.
It's just super common for me to do
Okay.
that anyway, so
Awesome.
it's an easy ask.
And
And the
it's a
last statement
requirement.
is just,
It's a requirement in the license.
Yeah, it's a requirement, but it's something I'm not pushing it.
The last thing, just to say to the public, that if you, in the future, you start seeing deer running around up there that are orange and yellow and green now, is not a genetic mutation up there, it's just maybe paintball.
Yeah, they don't really congregate by us, there's too much
Right.
activity, so they kind of just scatter away from us.
Well, I think we would, less deer the better, right, Bob?
Listen, how many deer hits,
accidents?
chief?
How many deer hits
A lot.
this year?
Yeah, and I'll also add too, we don't, like, we're not taking out trees, like, we want the trees there.
No, I know, I
And
get
we're
that.
not putting any
Right.
permanent structures, you know, I brought pictures, we got 250-gallon drums, we pick them up, we move them somewhere else. Everything's-
Natural down trees are great
Down
cover
trees for us are
paintball.
perfect, we just organize them so that
Mm-hmm.
they make a little barrier.
And engineering and building department have to approve even non-affixed improvements to the property, whether it's a storage container, and it's all provided for in the license agreement. And Dean and I sat down and went over it, that he's gonna have to make application to the building department. So,
Dean, you're currently on Edwards Avenue now, or is that still
Yeah,
open?
yeah, we're on, it's like a temporary site. We, you know, obviously, I think everybody knows we were displaced when it came time for the solar project.
Right.
So we moved temporarily just a little bit north, but that's the Solar 2 project.
Right.
So, you know.
How big is that project? Is it what you're using now, area-wise?
We're probably using 20 acres over there, but again, the lot's 20 acres, it's.
Not all of it's usable?
Yeah, we're up
because
against the
of
horse
terrain
farm,
or- yeah.
where we can't really use that area over there, and then we're up against another farm, so we stay back.
Good.
So, yeah.
Supervisor, did you have any comments or questions you wanted to add before the conversation about paintball is over?
No, it's great to see a lot of activities being worked on at that location, and we just got to get them moving. There's a lot of work to be done, but this is all good stuff, and thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Emery.
All right.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks,
Thank you, Ray.
Dean,
Dean,
and
I've never
Marie.
seen ammunition
You
in
want your
smiley
maps
face
back?
bags.
Yeah,
I
that
will.
was intentional.
No.
Yes, we do. All right, that concludes our open session discussion items for today. We're going to go into executive session in just a moment. We have a couple items on the docket there today. Personnel, matters surrounding the possible leave of absence of an employee with Chief Hagermiller. Matters surrounding a personnel investigation with Strickland, Teo, and Ray Coyne. And also contractual, Alyssa Zuckerman, matters surrounding contractual agreement with the town of Riverhead and the CSEA. So can I have a first and a second to close the work session and enter into executive session?
Motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, all opposed? So
Aye.
stay safe, everyone, and thank you very much.
Bill.